Story 1. The first time the lighthouse screamed, 3 people vanished. And no one in Harrow's Point ever spoke about it again. The fog rolled in thick that night, swallowing the coastline in a slow, suffocating blanket of gray. Fishing boats had already returned to harbor, their crews uneasy despite calm waters. The sea itself wasn't dangerous. It was the lighthouse. Standing at the edge of a jagged cliff overlooking the Atlantic, Graven Rock Lighthouse had guided ships safely for over a century. Its tall, skeletal structure rose above the black cliffs like a watchful guardian. But for the last 14 years, it had been abandoned. Officially, it had shut down after modernization replaced manual beacons with satellite navigation. Unofficially, locals claimed the lighthouse had started transmitting something else. Something no ship should ever follow. Detective Elias Vance had never believed in ghost stories, until he received the call that dragged him back to Harrow's Point. He stepped out of his rental car and stared across the small coastal town, the salty wind tugging at his coat. Wooden houses lined the shoreline, their paint weathered by decades of storms. The docks creaked with every wave that slapped against the pilings. It looked peaceful, too peaceful. Elias adjusted his collar as Sheriff Clara Donnelly approached him across the gravel lot outside the police station. She hadn't changed much since he'd last seen her. Same sharp eyes, same posture that made her look permanently prepared for bad news. "You took your time coming back," she said. Elias offered a tired smile. "You didn't exactly leave this town on good terms with me." Clara crossed her arms. "You left. That's different." Elias glanced toward the ocean. "And yet here I am." Clara nodded once, her expression turning serious. 3 tourists disappeared last night, she said. They were exploring the cliffs near Graven Rock Lighthouse. Elias felt his chest tighten. "And you think it's connected?" Clara didn't answer immediately. Instead, she handed him a folder. Inside were photographs. 3 people stood smiling in front of a weathered motel sign. Samantha Pierce, 29. Jordan Ellis, 31. Theo Ramirez, 28. Vacationers. Out-of-towners. People who didn't know Harrow's Point's rules. Elias flipped to the final photograph. It showed muddy footprints leading toward the lighthouse trail, but none coming back. "They left their car at the trailhead," Clara explained. "Phones found inside. Wallets. Keys. No signs of struggle?" Clara shook her head. "Nothing." Elias closed the folder slowly. "That's not possible," he said. Clara met his gaze. 14 years ago, 6 locals disappeared the exact same way. Elias froze. He remembered. Everyone in town remembered. The night the lighthouse screamed. The night that broke Harrow's Point. Back then, Elias had been a rookie officer. 6 teenagers had gone exploring Graven Rock during a summer storm. Only one had come back, and she'd never spoken again. Elias swallowed. "What about the survivor?" he asked. Clara hesitated. "She died last winter." The words hung heavy between them. "That means we lost the only witness," Elias said quietly. "Not entirely," Clara replied. She pulled out another photograph. This one was older, faded at the edges. It showed a teenage girl standing beside a group of laughing friends. The survivor, Lena Crowhust. Across the photo, written in shaky pen, were 3 words. "The light called US." Elias stared at the handwriting, unease crawling across his skin. "Tell me everything," he said. The lighthouse trail. By late afternoon, Elias stood at the base of the cliff trail leading toward Graven Rock. The fog was already creeping back in, curling around the rocky shoreline below. Waves crashed violently against the cliff face, sending mist spraying upward. Clara walked beside him, flashlight in hand. "No one's been inside the lighthouse since it closed," she said. "Town council sealed it." Elias studied the rusted iron gate blocking the trail. The lock hung snapped open. Fresh. He crouched, examining the ground. 3 distinct sets of footprints, all heading upward, none returning. Elias stood slowly. "You searched inside?" Clara shook her head. "We were waiting for you." Elias raised an eyebrow. "Why me?" Clara's voice softened slightly. "Because you were there 14 years ago, when this started. Climbing toward the unknown." The trail twisted sharply along the cliffside, rocks slick with ocean spray. The lighthouse loomed closer with each step, its towering structure disappearing into the fog above. Elias's pulse quickened as memories surfaced. Sirens, Storm winds. The echoing sound that had haunted him ever since. The scream. Half mechanical, half human. They reached the top. The lighthouse stood before them like a decaying monument. Its glass lantern room was shattered. Rust streaked its white paint like dried blood. The heavy metal door hung slightly open. Elias and Clara exchanged a glance, then stepped inside. The rotting spiral. The air inside smelled like mold and saltwater decay. A spiral staircase wound upward into darkness. Elias shined his flashlight across the floor. More footprints. Fresh. And beside them, strange circular markings carved into the wood. Clara knelt. "They weren't here yesterday," she said quietly. Elias traced one symbol with his finger. It looked like a distorted compass, but instead of pointing north, every arrow pointed inward, toward the center, the first discovery. Halfway up the staircase, Clara froze. "Elias!" Her flashlight beam illuminated something wedged between the railing bars. A camera. Jordan Ellis's travel camera. Elias carefully retrieved it. The battery still blinked weakly. He turned it on. The final video file began playing. The footage showed Samantha laughing as they approached the lighthouse. Jordan's voice narrated playfully. "Urban Exploration Day 3, local legend says this place sings at night." The video suddenly cut to later. Nighttime. The camera shook violently as fog swallowed the cliff. Then, a sound filled the recording. Low. Vibrating. A distorted tone that pulsed like a heartbeat through metal. Samantha's voice whispered, "Do you hear that?" Theo responded, "It sounds like someone crying." The camera turned toward the lighthouse lantern room. A faint light flickered inside, even though the power had been cut for years. The sound grew louder. Jordan whispered, "It's calling us." Then the footage cut to static. Elias shut off the camera, his hands trembling slightly. "That's impossible," Clara whispered. Elias didn't respond, because he remembered hearing that exact sound 14 years ago. The lantern room. They climbed the final staircase slowly. The metal steps groaned beneath their weight. At the top, the lantern room door stood open. Fog swirled inside, carried by broken windows. Elias stepped forward carefully. The beam housing sat in the center, an enormous rusted mechanism once used to project light across miles of ocean. Now it stood silent, dead, except the floor around it was covered in carvings. Hundreds of circular symbols, all pointing inward, and in the center, 3 backpacks lay abandoned. Clara's voice shook. They were here. Elias approached cautiously. He opened one bag. Inside were Samantha's clothes, folded neatly. Beside them, her shoes. Elias felt dread coil in his chest. "They didn't leave in panic," he said. "They left everything behind voluntarily." Clara's flashlight swept across the walls. Then she gasped. The message. Carved into the lantern room glass were dozens of sentences scratched deep into the surface, each written in different handwriting, each overlapping, each repeating the same chilling phrase. "The light brings you home." Elias's pulse thundered in his ears. Clara whispered, "What does that even mean?" Before Elias could answer, the lighthouse groaned. Deep within its metal frame, something shifted. Then, a low hum vibrated through the structure. The same sound from the camera recording. The same sound Elias remembered from 14 years ago. The air vibrated. The carvings on the floor seemed to shimmer in the flickering light of their flashlights. And from somewhere below, footsteps echoed. Slow. Dragging. Not theirs. Clara raised her weapon. "Did you hear that?" Elias nodded slowly. "Yes." The footsteps stopped directly beneath them. Silence swallowed the lighthouse. Then, a whisper rose through the spiral staircase, so faint it barely sounded human. "Welcome back." Elias felt his blood run cold, because he recognized the voice. It belonged to someone who had disappeared 14 years ago. Someone presumed dead. The chapter closes. The lighthouse trembled again as fog poured through broken glass. Clara whispered, "Elias, who was that?" Elias stared down into the spiraling darkness, his voice barely audible. Someone who shouldn't be alive. And deep inside the rusting lighthouse, the signal pulsed again, calling, waiting, hunting. The fog thickened around Graven Rock Lighthouse, swallowing the cliffside in a suffocating gray blanket. The hum still vibrated through the metal structure, low and steady like a heartbeat echoing through the bones of the lighthouse. Elias Vance and Sheriff Clara Donnelly stood frozen in the lantern room, both staring into the spiral staircase below. The whisper they had heard still lingered in the air, as if it had crawled into the walls and refused to leave. "Welcome back." Clara slowly lowered her flashlight toward the staircase opening. "Elias," she whispered, "you said you recognized that voice." Elias didn't answer immediately. His jaw tightened as memories clawed their way to the surface, memories he had spent 14 years trying to bury. "It sounded like Daniel Crowhust," he finally said. Clara's breath caught. "Lena Crowhust's brother?" Elias nodded slowly. Clara shook her head in disbelief. "That's impossible. Daniel was one of the 6 teenagers who vanished during the storm. They never found a body." Elias swallowed hard. "I helped search those cliffs for 3 days. I remember every face on that missing poster. Daniel Crowhust was 16 years old." The lighthouse groaned again, metal beams shifting as if reacting to their conversation. Clara steadied herself. "Then either you're hearing ghosts, or someone wants us to believe they are." The evidence left behind. They searched the lantern room carefully. The 3 abandoned backpacks remained untouched, positioned almost ceremonially around the rusted beacon mechanism. Clara opened Theo Ramirez's bag first. Inside, she found his wallet, passport, and folded clothes, neatly arranged as if he had packed to leave, not been forced to disappear. "That's not panic behavior," Clara said quietly. Elias nodded. They prepared to leave their identities behind. He opened Jordan Ellis's backpack. Inside was a small notebook. The final entries were frantic and written with increasingly unstable handwriting. Elias read aloud. "The sound changes when the fog comes. We followed it without realizing. There's something under the lighthouse." Clara looked up sharply. "Under?" Elias flipped to the final page. The words were scratched deeply, as if carved with desperation. "It opens when the light wakes up." Searching the spiral, they descended the staircase slowly, the metal steps echoing under their boots. The humming grew stronger the lower they went, vibrating through the railing and into Elias's palms as he gripped it. Halfway down, Clara stopped. "Look." She shined her flashlight toward the base of the stairwell. The wooden floor below appeared damaged, splintered outward in a circular pattern, as if something heavy had been dragged across it repeatedly. Elias crouched and ran his fingers across the grooves. "These marks aren't random," he said. "They form the same symbol we saw upstairs." Clara stepped closer. "You think there's a hidden entry?" Elias nodded. Jordan's notebook said there was something beneath the lighthouse. And if the circle markings we saw upstairs are part of a pattern, this might be a key. They searched the floor carefully, testing boards and examining joints. After several tense minutes, Elias's flashlight beam caught a rusted metal ring embedded in the wood, barely visible beneath layers of salt and debris. Clara grabbed it. "Help me lift." They pulled together. The wooden panel creaked loudly before sliding aside, revealing a narrow stone shaft descending into darkness. Cold air rushed upward, stale, damp, and smelling faintly of seaweed and decay. Clara whispered, "That was not in any structural blueprint." Elias stared into the opening. "No," he said quietly. "It wasn't meant to be found. The descent." The hidden passage contained an old iron ladder bolted into the stone wall, descending nearly 30 feet into darkness. Clara hesitated. "You're thinking what I'm thinking, right? That if 3 tourists came here and vanished," Elias said, "their trail probably continues down there." Clara took a deep breath and slung her weapon across her shoulder. "Then we go down." Elias followed. Each step downward echoed in the hollow shaft, the humming sound growing louder with every rung. The temperature dropped noticeably, cold moisture clinging to their clothes as seawater dripped steadily from cracks in the stone. When they reached the bottom, they stepped onto a rough stone floor. Their flashlights revealed something that made Clara freeze. The chamber stretched wider than the lighthouse foundation itself, a circular cavern carved directly into the cliffside bedrock, and its walls were covered in carvings. Hundreds of them, the same inward-pointing circular symbol repeated endlessly. The Cavern of Echoes. At the center of the chamber stood an ancient-looking structure, not modern, not part of the lighthouse. It resembled a stone platform surrounded by metal equipment installed decades later. Old wires, rusted generators, and broken radio components formed a chaotic ring around the platform. Elias slowly approached. "This place existed before the lighthouse," he said. Clara scanned the equipment. "These machines were installed later, like someone tried to connect the lighthouse to whatever this is." Elias stepped onto the stone platform carefully. The surface was worn smooth, etched with spiraling grooves forming a massive version of the symbol they had seen upstairs. Suddenly, Clara's flashlight caught something near the edge of the cavern. She gasped. The missing tourist's trail. 3 sets of clothes lay folded neatly on the cavern floor. The tourist's clothing. Samantha's red jacket. Jordan's hiking boots. Theo's watch. All placed in a straight line facing the platform. Clara whispered, "They came down here willingly." Elias nodded slowly, dread building in his chest. They thought they were answering something. He examined the ground carefully. Bare footprints led directly toward the platform, but they stopped halfway. No exit prints. No drag marks. No signs of struggle. Just disappearance. The signal machine. Clara moved toward the rusted equipment surrounding the platform. "This looks like a transmitter," she said. "Old maritime radio gear, combined with electrical amplifiers." Elias joined her. Someone modified lighthouse technology to broadcast sound frequencies. Clara turned toward him. "You're saying the lighthouse wasn't guiding ships anymore. It was broadcasting this signal." Elias nodded grimly. "And whatever frequency they created, it influenced people." Clara swallowed. "You mean controlled them?" Elias didn't respond, because deep inside, he remembered the storm 14 years ago, and the moment he nearly walked into the lighthouse himself. The hidden recording. Clara searched one of the broken consoles and discovered a rusted tape recorder hidden beneath wiring bundles. She pressed play. Static filled the chamber before a male voice began speaking, calm, scientific, detached. "Test log, Phase 1 acoustic induction. Subject response indicates auditory attraction to harmonic pulse. Continued exposure increases compliance." Clara's face drained of color. Another voice followed, older, confident. "The lighthouse provides perfect geographic amplification. The ocean carries the frequency. Fog enhances directional perception." Elias felt cold realization settle into his bones. "They weaponized the lighthouse," he whispered. "The impossible footage." Clara found another tape labeled Storm Event, Year 14. She pressed play. The recording crackled. Wind howled violently in the background. Teenage voices laughed nervously. Then, the humming began. The same sound Elias had heard earlier. One of the teenagers spoke. "Daniel, where are you going?" Another voice answered softly. "Can't you hear it? It's calling us home." Elias staggered backward. That was Daniel Crowhust's voice. Clear. Undeniable. The tape continued. Screaming wind. Footsteps running. Then, silence. The first phenomenon. Suddenly the cavern trembled. Water droplets fell from the ceiling as the humming returned, louder than before. Clara grabbed her radio. "Dispatch, do you copy? We have structural movement beneath the lighthouse." Only static answered. Elias stared toward the stone platform. The grooves carved into its surface were glowing faintly. Not electrical, not mechanical, but something reflective, like light moving through stone itself. Clara stepped closer. "Elias, the carvings are reacting." The humming intensified, vibrating through the cavern walls. The rusted transmitter equipment sparked violently, activating itself despite years of corrosion. And then, the ocean outside roared louder than Elias had ever heard. Water slammed against the cliffside with unnatural force, sending tremors through the cavern. Clara whispered, "This isn't just a machine." Elias nodded slowly. "No, I think someone discovered something ancient and tried to use it." The sudden collapse. Without warning, part of the cavern ceiling cracked. Rock fragments rained down as seawater began pouring through the fissure. "We have to go," Clara shouted. They scrambled toward the ladder as water rushed across the stone floor, flooding the chamber rapidly. As Elias climbed, he glanced downward one last time. The stone platform pulsed faintly beneath the rising water, and for a split second, he swore he saw silhouettes standing on it. Watching. Waiting. The escape. They burst out of the hidden shaft and slammed the wooden panel shut as seawater roared beneath it. The lighthouse trembled violently, metal groaning as waves slammed into the cliff below. Clara gasped for breath. What was that place? Elias stared at the staircase, his face pale. I don't know, he admitted, but someone turned it into a beacon, and it's still active. Outside, thunder rolled across the ocean as fog swallowed the lighthouse once again. And somewhere beneath them, the signal continued pulsing. Back in town, fishermen would soon report hearing the humming sound across the harbor, and several residents would begin sleepwalking toward the cliffs. Meanwhile, Elias uncovers shocking evidence that the original lighthouse engineer may have discovered the cavern over a century ago, and documented something far more terrifying than modern science can explain. And worst of all, a surveillance camera near the docks will capture a figure walking out of the ocean at midnight. A figure matching Daniel Crowhust's missing person file, 14 years after he vanished. The first time Detective Aaron Malick listened to Emily Carter's final phone call, he didn't say a word for nearly 2 full minutes after it ended. The audio crackled with static, distorted by weak cellular reception, but the panic in Emily's voice cut through every layer of interference. She sounded breathless, terrified, and completely alone. He leaned back in his chair inside the cold case division of Crestwood Police Department, eyes fixed on the waveform displayed across his computer monitor. The file had been archived for nearly 7 years, untouched except for routine catalog maintenance. It was labeled simply, Evidence Item #E14, Victim Emergency Call, 10:42 p.m. Aaron pressed play again. Hello? Hello? I need help. Emily's voice trembled, the sound of wind roaring faintly through the receiver. It sounded like she was outside, moving, or running. This is 911. What's your emergency? The dispatcher asked calmly. I think someone's following me, Emily whispered. I'm on Pine Hollow Road, near the old quarry. My car broke down. Aaron's jaw tightened. Pine Hollow Road. Even before reopening the case, he remembered that stretch of asphalt, a narrow, tree-lined road that twisted through miles of abandoned mining land. Poor lighting. Minimal traffic. No nearby businesses. If someone wanted to isolate a victim, it was a perfect hunting ground. The dispatcher asked Emily to stay on the line. Can you see anyone? The operator asked. I saw headlights earlier, Emily said, her voice shaking harder now. They stopped behind me, but when I got out, the car turned off its lights. I don't see it anymore. Static crackled. Aaron glanced down at the case file photographs spread across his desk. Images of Emily Carter smiling at a university graduation ceremony, her arm wrapped around her mother. In every picture, she radiated confidence and warmth. A psychology graduate student, 24 years old, no criminal record, no history of risky behavior. Just gone. Back in the recording, Emily gasped suddenly. I hear footsteps. The dispatcher immediately shifted tone. Emily, listen to me carefully. Are you near your vehicle? No. I left it. I thought I saw someone inside it. Aaron paused the audio. Inside the vehicle? He frowned. That detail had been buried in the original investigation notes, mentioned once and never pursued further. According to officers at the time, Emily's car was found abandoned with the driver's door open, keys still inside the ignition. No signs of forced entry, no fingerprints except hers. He resumed the recording. Emily, stay calm, the dispatcher said. Can you describe the person you think is following you? There was a long pause. The sound of crunching gravel echoed through the phone. I can't see them, Emily whispered, but I can hear them walking behind me. Aaron leaned closer to the speakers. Footsteps. He noticed something now, something subtle. The rhythm was uneven. Slow, deliberate, almost dragging. A shiver crawled up his spine. Then Emily screamed. The sound erupted so suddenly Aaron flinched, even though he had heard it twice already. He's right behind me. The line cut into violent static. Then silence. Aaron exhaled slowly, rubbing his temples. That was where the call ended. No location update. No confirmed sighting. The responding patrol units had arrived 23 minutes later. Too late to find anything except Emily's abandoned car and tire tracks leading away from the roadside. The original investigators concluded she had likely been abducted by an unknown assailant passing through Crestwood. A transient predator. Possibly someone from outside the area. Case stalled. Eventually shelved. But Aaron didn't believe in coincidences, especially not after what he'd found in the Riverside storage facility. A knock sounded on his office door. Detective Lena Vasquez stepped inside, carrying 2 cups of coffee and a folder thick with freshly printed documents. "Thought you could use this," she said, sliding 1 cup across his desk. Aaron nodded gratefully. "Tell me you found something," he said. Lena dropped the folder in front of him. "I pulled surveillance logs from traffic cameras near Pine Hollow Road the night Emily disappeared," she said. "Most of the footage was corrupted or overwritten, but one camera at the Cedar Bridge intersection still had archived metadata." Aaron raised an eyebrow. "Metadata?" "No full video," Lena said, "but it logged vehicle plate scans." She flipped open the folder and tapped a highlighted line. There were only 3 vehicles recorded entering Pine Hollow Road within an hour of Emily's 911 call. Aaron leaned forward. "Emily's car?" he asked. "Confirmed," Lena said. The second vehicle belonged to a local farm supplier truck. Driver was interviewed back then. Solid alibi. She paused. Aaron felt his pulse quicken. "And the third?" he asked. Lena met his eyes. "A white cargo van." Aaron stared at the plate number printed across the page. It felt strangely familiar. "Registered to who?" he asked. "That's the problem," Lena said quietly. "It wasn't." Aaron looked up sharply. "The registration was fake," she continued. "Stolen plates reported missing from a dealership in Brookdale 2 weeks before Emily vanished." Aaron leaned back in his chair, mind racing. "This wasn't random," he murmured. "No," Lena agreed. "And it gets worse." She turned another page. "I cross-checked that stolen plate report with unsolved missing persons cases across 3 neighboring counties." Aaron's stomach tightened. "And?" Lena slid 3 photographs across the desk. 3 women, all in their 20s. All smiling in snapshots captured before their lives abruptly ended. Every one of them disappeared within 5 miles of Pine Hollow Road over the last decade, Lena said. Aaron swallowed hard. "Why wasn't this connection made before?" he asked. "Because each disappearance was handled by different jurisdictions," Lena replied. "Different detectives, different case files. No centralized database back then." Aaron looked at the photos again, dread pooling in his chest. "This is a pattern," he said. Rain began tapping against the office windows, echoing faintly across the nearly empty police department. It was approaching midnight, and most of the building had gone dark. Aaron gathered the photographs, arranging them in chronological order. 2009, Hannah Doyle. 2012, Rebecca Lane. 2015, Tara Whitfield. 2019, Emily Carter. For disappearances, for unsolved cases, all tied to the same isolated road. "Whoever did this," Aaron said slowly, "he's been operating for years." Lena nodded grimly. "And he stopped after Emily." Aaron frowned. "Or he got smarter," he said. Aaron reopened Emily's file, flipping through witness statements. One in particular caught his attention. A gas station clerk who claimed Emily stopped for fuel approximately 30 minutes before her disappearance. "She seemed nervous," the clerk had said. "Kept checking her rearview mirror." Aaron looked up at Lena. "Did we ever identify the vehicle she thought was following her?" he asked. Lena shook her head. "No confirmed sightings," she said. But the clerk mentioned something interesting. Said Emily asked if there was another route to Crestwood that avoided Pine Hollow Road. Aaron blinked. "She didn't want to drive there," he said. "Exactly." Aaron's gaze drifted back to the photographs, which meant she may have been forced toward that road. At 1:17 a.m., Aaron and Lena drove out to Pine Hollow Road themselves. Fog hung low across the valley, clinging to the dense pine forest surrounding the narrow stretch of pavement. The road twisted sharply, its faded yellow centerline barely visible beneath scattered gravel and fallen branches. Aaron parked near the spot where Emily's car had been found. The area felt wrong. Too quiet. Too still. Lena stepped out first, shining her flashlight toward the treeline. The beam caught thick underbrush and towering pines that blocked nearly all moonlight. "If someone was watching her from here," she said, "she wouldn't have seen them." Aaron nodded, stepping onto the gravel shoulder. He crouched near the ditch where Emily's tire tracks had been documented in old crime scene photos. Time and weather had erased any physical evidence, but he studied the terrain carefully. Something nagged at him. He stood slowly, scanning the surroundings. Then he noticed it. A narrow dirt trail partially hidden behind overgrown shrubs about 30 feet from the roadside. "Lena," he called quietly. She turned. "Look at this." They approached the trail cautiously. It sloped downward into the forest, barely wide enough for a vehicle but clearly worn by repeated use. Aaron shined his flashlight across the ground. Tire impressions. Faint, but visible beneath layers of dried mud. "Someone's been driving through here," Lena whispered. Aaron followed the trail with his eyes as it disappeared deeper into the woods. "Where does it lead?" he asked. Lena checked her tablet, pulling up satellite maps. "There's nothing officially marked," she said. "But about half a mile in, there used to be an old quarry maintenance road. It's been abandoned since the mines shut down." Aaron's pulse quickened. "Let's go." They walked slowly down the trail, flashlights cutting through thick fog. The forest swallowed sound, leaving only the crunch of leaves beneath their boots. After nearly 10 minutes, the trail opened into a clearing. And there it stood, an old, rusted metal gate chained across a gravel driveway. Beyond it, barely visible through the mist, was a dilapidated warehouse structure. Aaron's breath caught. "This place isn't in the original case file," he said. Lena stepped closer to the gate, examining the chain. "It's newer than the building," she said. Aaron scanned the ground. Fresh tire tracks. Not years old. Recent. Very recent. He felt adrenaline surge through his veins. "Someone's still using this place," he said. Suddenly, a faint metallic clang echoed from somewhere inside the warehouse. Both detectives froze. Lena slowly unholstered her service weapon. Aaron did the same. They exchanged a tense glance. Then another sound followed, a dull scraping noise, like something heavy being dragged across concrete. Aaron's voice dropped to a whisper. "We need backup," he said. Lena nodded, already reaching for her radio. But before she could speak, a faint glow flickered inside one of the warehouse windows, a dim yellow light switching on briefly, then off again. Aaron felt his heart slam against his ribs. Someone was inside, and they knew the detectives were there. The forest behind them suddenly erupted with the roar of an engine. Both detectives spun around. Headlights burst through the fog from the trail they had just walked down, bright, blinding, racing straight toward them. "Move!" Aaron shouted. The vehicle accelerated. A white cargo van barreled through the brush, smashing through branches as it sped toward the clearing. Lena dove sideways, barely clearing the gate as the van screeched to a halt just yards away. The driver's door swung open. A figure stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, face hidden behind darkness. Aaron raised his weapon. "Police! Don't move!" The figure paused, then smiled. Aaron couldn't see the expression clearly, but he felt it. Cold, mocking. And before either detective could react, the man turned and sprinted toward the warehouse, disappearing through a side entrance as alarms began blaring from inside the building. Aaron cursed under his breath. "He's running!" They rushed toward the gate, and realized too late it was locked from the inside. Metal shutters slammed down across the warehouse windows, and somewhere deep within the structure, a woman's scream echoed through the night. Aaron stared at the sealed building, dread gripping his chest. For the first time since reopening Emily Carter's case, he knew one thing with absolute certainty. Emily hadn't been the last victim, and if they didn't get inside that warehouse soon, someone else was about to disappear forever. The scream still echoed in Aaron Malick's ears long after it stopped. For a moment, the clearing fell into suffocating silence, broken only by the sharp wail of an automated alarm system echoing from inside the abandoned warehouse. The metal shutters that had slammed down over the windows vibrated slightly, rattling like the building itself was breathing. Aaron gripped the locked gate, his knuckles turning white as adrenaline surged through him. "Damn it!" he shouted, rattling the chain violently. Lena was already speaking rapidly into her radio. "Dispatch, this is Detective Vasquez. We need immediate tactical backup at the old Crestwood Quarry warehouse. Possible active abduction in progress. Suspect fled inside the structure. Repeat, active situation." Static crackled before dispatch responded. "Backup units are en route. Estimated arrival, 8 minutes." Aaron cursed under his breath. 8 minutes could mean life or death. He stepped back, scanning the perimeter, his mind racing. The warehouse sat in the middle of a wide gravel lot surrounded by dense pine forest. The only visible entrance was the large sliding metal door at the front, currently sealed shut. But Aaron knew buildings like this always had secondary access points. "Check the east side," he said, already moving along the fence line. "There has to be another way in." The fog thickened as they circled the perimeter, their flashlights slicing through swirling mist. The warehouse structure loomed above them, rusted steel siding, shattered roof panels, and long streaks of water damage running down its walls like dried tears. Aaron's boots crunched across gravel as he scanned for weak spots in the fencing or alternate doors. Then Lena stopped abruptly. "Aaron here." He turned. She stood near a collapsed section of fencing partially hidden by overgrown brush. The wire had been cut cleanly, not broken by age or weather. "Recently cut." Aaron crouched, inspecting the sharp edges. "Bolt cutters," he muttered. He pushed through the opening cautiously, weapon raised. Lena followed close behind. They approached a smaller service door near the rear of the warehouse. The door was slightly ajar, swaying faintly in the wind. Aaron exchanged a tense glance with Lena. "You ready?" he whispered. She nodded, tightening her grip on her pistol. Aaron nudged the door open slowly. The smell hit them first. A thick, metallic odor mixed with mold and chemical residue. The air inside felt damp and stale, like the building had trapped decades of decay within its walls. Aaron stepped inside carefully, his flashlight beam sweeping across cracked concrete floors and rows of abandoned industrial equipment. The alarm system blared overhead, a shrill, looping siren that echoed violently through the cavernous interior. "Where is that coming from?" Lena asked, shouting over the noise. Aaron scanned the ceiling. "Motion sensors, probably." He armed the place. They moved deeper inside, their footsteps echoing through the vast open space. Rusted conveyor belts and broken machinery formed a maze of shadows, creating countless hiding places. Then Aaron heard it, a faint thumping sound, rhythmic, weak, like someone pounding against a surface. He froze, raising a hand to signal Lena to stop. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. She tilted her head, focusing past the alarm's shriek. Then she nodded. "It's coming from below us." Aaron spotted a stairwell at the far end of the warehouse floor, partially concealed behind stacked wooden pallets. The metal railing was corroded and unstable, but the steps themselves looked reinforced, newer than the rest of the building. They approached cautiously. The pounding sound grew louder, followed by a muffled cry. Aaron's heart slammed against his ribs. "There's someone down there," he said. Lena nodded grimly. "Then we don't wait." The stairwell descended into darkness. Their flashlights illuminated concrete walls stained with water and age. The temperature dropped noticeably as they reached the lower level. And then they saw it. A reinforced steel door at the bottom of the stairs, modern, heavy-duty, with a keypad lock mounted beside it. The pounding sound was coming from behind it. Aaron tried the handle. Locked. Lena immediately raised her weapon, stepping back. "Move," she said. Aaron stepped aside. She fired 2 precise shots into the keypad unit. Sparks erupted as the system shorted out. Aaron grabbed the handle and shoved. The door burst open. The room inside made Aaron's stomach twist violently. It was a makeshift holding chamber. Concrete walls lined with chains bolted into the floor. Dim overhead lights flickered, casting long, distorted shadows across the room. 3 metal cages sat along the far wall. 2 were empty. 1 was not. Inside the 3rd cage, a young woman huddled in the corner, her wrists bound with zip ties. Her clothes were torn, her face streaked with tears and dirt. She stared at them with wide, terrified eyes. Aaron rushed forward, dropping to his knees beside the cage. "It's okay," he said gently. "You're safe now. We're police." The woman sobbed, nodding rapidly. Lena scanned the room, weapon still raised. "There's no one else down here," she said. Aaron pulled a multi-tool from his belt and began cutting through the cage lock. "What's your name?" he asked softly. "Claire," she whispered. "Claire Donnelly." Aaron's heart skipped. He recognized that name. Claire Donnelly had been reported missing 2 days earlier. Once freed, Claire collapsed into Aaron's arms, shaking uncontrollably. He said you wouldn't find me," she cried. "He said nobody ever does." Aaron helped her stand carefully. "Did you see his face?" Lena asked. Claire nodded weakly. "Yes." Aaron and Lena exchanged a sharp glance. "Tell us," Aaron said. Claire swallowed hard. He wears gloves, she said. Always gloves. And he smells like engine oil. Aaron felt a chill creep down his spine. He kept talking about Emily, Claire continued. He said she was special. Aaron froze. What did he say about her? He asked. Claire's voice trembled. He said she fought harder than the others. Suddenly, the warehouse lights above flickered violently. Then went dark. The alarm system cut off mid-siren. Silence swallowed the building. Lena stiffened. He killed the power, she whispered. Aaron's pulse raced. He's still here. Footsteps echoed somewhere above them. Slow, measured, deliberate. The exact same uneven rhythm Aaron had heard in Emily's final 911 call. Claire gasped, clutching Aaron's arm. That's him, she whispered. Aaron guided her toward the stairwell. Lena, get her out. Take her to the perimeter and meet incoming units. What about you? Lena asked. Aaron reloaded his weapon. I'm ending this. Lena hesitated only briefly before nodding. Don't be a hero, she said quietly. Aaron gave a tight nod. I'll be smart instead. She helped Claire toward the stairs, disappearing into the darkness above. Aaron remained in the basement chamber alone, listening. The footsteps continued pacing across the floor overhead. He moved slowly toward the stairwell, every muscle in his body tense. As he reached the top step, he killed his flashlight and relied on faint moonlight filtering through broken roof panels. The warehouse floor had transformed into a maze of shadows. Then he saw movement, a silhouette slipping between rows of machinery. Aaron raised his weapon. Police, he shouted. You're surrounded. The figure paused briefly, then laughed. Low, cold, mocking. You're too late, detective, the man called from the darkness. Aaron's breath caught. You know who I am, he demanded. Oh, I've known for years, the voice replied. Aaron's grip tightened on his weapon. What do you mean? The man stepped partially into the moonlight. Aaron still couldn't see his face, only the outline of a tall frame and gloved hands resting casually at his sides. You reopened Emily Carter's case, the man said calmly. You just couldn't let her stay buried, could you? Aaron felt anger flare inside him. You murdered her, he said. The man tilted his head. Murder is such an ugly word, he said softly. I prefer preservation. Aaron's stomach churned. Where are the others? He demanded. The man smiled faintly. Aaron could hear it in his voice. Safe, he said. Forever remembered. Unlike most people. Aaron stepped forward slowly. You're done, he said. The man chuckled. No, detective. I'm just getting started. Suddenly, the sound of sirens pierced the forest outside, backup units arriving. The man's posture stiffened slightly. Then he reached into his jacket. Aaron tensed. But instead of pulling a weapon, the man tossed something onto the concrete floor between them. A small object skidded toward Aaron's feet. Aaron glanced down. A flip phone. Old model. He looked back up, but the man was already moving, sprinting toward the far end of the warehouse where a large emergency exit door burst open into the forest. Aaron fired one warning shot. The man didn't stop. By the time Aaron reached the exit, the suspect had vanished into the dense fog and pine trees beyond. Backup officers flooded the clearing seconds later, but the killer was gone. Again, Aaron stood in the doorway, breathing heavily, staring into the dark forest. Then he looked down at the phone lying in his hand. The screen flickered to life automatically. One saved contact appeared. Emily. Aaron's blood ran cold. He opened the message inbox. There was only one unread text. Sent exactly 7 years ago. Aaron opened it, and felt his entire world tilt sideways. The message read, If you're reading this, I'm still alive. Aaron Malik stared at the glowing screen, his pulse hammering in his ears as the words burned into his mind. If you're reading this, I'm still alive. The warehouse behind him buzzed with activity. Officers flooded the building, paramedics escorted Claire Donnelly to an ambulance, and crime scene technicians began documenting the basement chamber. But all of it faded into background noise. Aaron couldn't tear his eyes away from the phone. 7 years ago, Emily Carter's disappearance had defined his career, defined his failures, defined the sleepless nights and obsession that had slowly eaten away at his personal life. He had followed every lead, chased every witness, hunted every rumor. And now this. Malik. Lena Vasquez jogged toward him, breath fogging in the cold night air. She stopped short when she saw his expression. "What happened?" she asked. Aaron silently handed her the phone. She read the message, her brows knitting tightly. "This could be staged," she said cautiously. Aaron nodded slowly. "Or it could be real." They moved toward Lena's unmarked SUV, stepping away from the chaos of flashing lights and police radios. The forest around the quarry rustled softly in the wind, like it was eavesdropping. Lena examined the phone carefully. "No modern tracking hardware," she said. "No recent data activity either. This thing is ancient." Aaron leaned against the vehicle, rubbing his jaw. "Emily disappeared in 2019, he said. "Her phone was never recovered. Could this be hers?" Aaron hesitated. "It's the same model she owned," he said quietly. Lena glanced up. "You sound like you already believe it." Aaron didn't answer. Minutes later, tech analyst Jordan Pike arrived on scene with portable forensic equipment. Young, brilliant, and annoyingly cheerful under pressure, Jordan immediately went to work extracting data from the device. Aaron and Lena watched silently as Jordan connected the phone to his laptop. "Okay," Jordan muttered, scanning through system files. "This is weird." "How weird?" Lena asked. Jordan turned the screen toward them. "The phone hasn't connected to a cellular network in 7 years, he said. "But it's been powered on intermittently." Aaron frowned. "Intermittently how?" Jordan pulled up a timeline. "Every year. Same date. Same time. Exactly midnight on October 14th. Aaron felt a chill crawl up his spine. "That's the night Emily disappeared," he whispered. Jordan nodded. "And there's more." He clicked into the messaging log. "This message you found? It was drafted the night she vanished, but it wasn't sent until tonight." Lena stiffened. "Meaning someone accessed the phone recently." "Exactly," Jordan confirmed. Aaron's thoughts raced. "He's been keeping it," Aaron said. "Keeping it as a trophy." Lena crossed her arms. "Or as leverage." By dawn, Aaron and Lena returned to Crestwood Police Department headquarters. The building buzzed with tension as news of the warehouse discovery spread through the department. Captain Morales waited in Aaron's office, arms folded tightly across her chest. "I want answers," she said bluntly. Aaron placed the phone on his desk. "You're looking at them." She picked it up carefully, reading the message. Her expression hardened. "You think Carter is alive?" "I think the killer wants us to believe she might be," Aaron replied. Morales exhaled slowly. "Either way, this changes everything." Jordan burst into the office moments later, excitement radiating off him. "I found something else," he said, slightly breathless. He plugged his laptop into the wall monitor. The screen displayed a series of encrypted image files recovered from the phone's storage. "Most of these are corrupted," Jordan explained, "but I managed to reconstruct one." He clicked open the file. The room fell silent. The image was grainy, dark, taken inside a confined space. It showed a woman sitting on a concrete floor, hands bound, face partially obscured by shadow. Aaron stepped closer. His breath caught. "It's her," he whispered. The timestamp at the bottom of the photo read, October 14th, 2019, 11:57 p.m. 3 minutes before Emily's disappearance was reported. Lena leaned closer to the screen. "She looks injured," she said. Aaron nodded. "And terrified." Jordan pointed to the background of the image. "There's something else," he said. I enhanced the lighting. The image sharpened slightly. Behind Emily, etched faintly into the wall, was a symbol. Aaron recognized it instantly. A spiral shape, with a single dot at the center. The same symbol found in the Crestwood warehouse basement. Morales leaned forward slowly. "You're telling me this guy has been operating for 7 years?" "Longer," Aaron said quietly. "If Emily wasn't his first victim." By mid-morning, missing persons reports spanning the last decade were pulled from state databases. Lena and Aaron sat side by side in the conference room, scanning through files. "Look at this," Lena said, sliding a folder toward him. Aaron opened it. Name, Tara Whitmore. Missing since 2016. Last seen, gas station outside Crestwood. Case status, cold. Aaron flipped through the photos. Tara wore a small pendant necklace, shaped like a spiral. Aaron's stomach tightened. "Another one," he murmured. They pulled more files. Each victim shared subtle similarities. A female. Age 18 to 30. A last seen alone. disappeared near industrial or forested areas. Some photographed wearing spiral jewelry or tattoos. Aaron leaned back slowly. He's selecting them, he said. Based on the symbol? Lena asked. Aaron nodded grimly. This isn't random. Later that afternoon, Claire Donnelly was stable enough to give a full statement at the hospital. Aaron and Lena sat beside her bed as she nervously twisted the blanket in her hands. He talked to you? Lena asked gently. Claire nodded. He liked to talk, she said softly. Said it helped him remember them. Aaron exchanged a glance with Lena. Remember who? He asked. Claire swallowed. The girls before me. Aaron leaned forward. Did he ever mention Emily Carter? Claire hesitated. Yes, she whispered. He said she was his masterpiece. Aaron's jaw tightened. What does that mean? Claire's eyes filled with tears. He said she survived longer than any of them. The room fell into stunned silence. Aaron felt his pulse hammering violently. Did he say if she was still alive? Lena asked carefully. Claire nodded slowly. He said she still sings. Aaron's heart stopped. Sings, he repeated. Claire wiped her eyes. He said he keeps her somewhere quiet, where he can hear her voice when he needs peace. That night, Aaron sat alone in his apartment, the phone lying on the kitchen table in front of him. The glow from its screen reflected in his tired eyes. He opened the message again. If you're reading this, I'm still alive. He stared at the timestamp, his mind replaying every moment of Emily's case. Every search party, every interview, every dead end. He had attended her memorial service. Watched her parents bury an empty coffin. Promised himself he would never stop searching. And now, this message suggested he might have failed her in a completely different way. The phone vibrated suddenly. Aaron froze. He stared at the screen as it lit up. Incoming message. Unknown sender. His hand trembled slightly as he opened it. The text read, "You're getting closer, detective." Aaron shot to his feet, scanning his apartment instinctively. Another message appeared instantly. "But you still don't understand the rules." Aaron grabbed his jacket and gun, adrenaline surging through him. A third message appeared. "Come alone tomorrow night." His pulse pounded. "If you want to hear her sing again." Aaron stared at the screen, horror and determination colliding inside his chest. The final message appeared seconds later. It contained only an address. An abandoned church, deep in the Crestwood outskirts. Aaron grabbed his keys and rushed toward the door, dialing Lena's number as he moved. She answered on the second ring. "Aaron, we have a location," he said. "Where?" He hesitated briefly, staring at the phone again. "The killer wants me to come alone." Lena's voice sharpened instantly. "You're not seriously considering that." Aaron closed his eyes. "He says Emily might still be alive." Silence stretched across the line. Then Lena spoke quietly. "We do this smart," she said. "Not reckless." Aaron exhaled slowly. But deep down he already knew. He would go, even if it was a trap. Across town, inside a dimly lit room lined with photographs and newspaper clippings, a man wearing black leather gloves stared at a small surveillance monitor. On the screen, Aaron stood in his apartment, phone pressed tightly to his ear. The man smiled faintly. Then he turned toward a steel door at the far end of the room. Soft humming drifted from behind it. A female voice, weak, but unmistakably alive. Rain began falling just after sunset. Not a gentle drizzle, but a steady, cold downpour that turned Crestwood's streets into shining black mirrors beneath the streetlights. Thunder rolled in slow, distant waves, as if the storm itself was warning anyone still outside to seek shelter. Aaron Malik sat inside his car 2 blocks from the abandoned church, rain hammering against his windshield. The building loomed in the distance, a skeletal silhouette against the storm-dark sky. Its bell tower leaned slightly, cracked by years of neglect, and the stained-glass windows were shattered or boarded shut. The address from the killer's message had led him here, and now he waited. His hands rested on the steering wheel, steady but tense. The burner phone sat in the passenger seat beside him, screen dark, silent, like it was watching him back. He checked his watch. 10:57 p.m. 3 minutes until midnight. The exact time Emily Carter had disappeared 7 years ago. Aaron exhaled slowly, then reached into his jacket and adjusted the concealed body wire Lena had insisted he wear. The tiny transmitter was hidden beneath his collar, nearly impossible to detect unless someone was searching for it. He had argued against backup. Lena had ignored him. Across town, inside an unmarked surveillance van parked near the church's rear cemetery, Lena Vasquez monitored the audio feed through a headset. Beside her, Jordan Pike worked feverishly on multiple screens, tracking signal interference and scanning for hidden frequencies. "You're still getting him?" Jordan asked. "Clear as day," Lena replied, though tension lined her voice. She glanced at the tactical team stationed quietly in the surrounding forest. They waited under her command, ready to move if things escalated. But they couldn't move too soon. If the killer suspected backup, Emily, if she truly was alive, might disappear forever. Aaron stepped out of the car. Rain soaked him instantly, cold droplets running down his face as he approached the church slowly. His boots splashed through shallow puddles, echoing in the eerie stillness. The church doors stood partially open, swaying slightly in the wind. Aaron placed one hand on his weapon, the other pushing the door open fully. The interior smelled of rot, mold, and damp wood. Broken pews lay scattered across the floor, and shattered stained glass littered the aisle like frozen tears. Moonlight filtered through the roof's collapsed sections, illuminating floating dust and drifting rainwater. "Hello," Aaron called cautiously. His voice echoed hollowly through the sanctuary. Silence answered. He stepped deeper inside. Behind the altar, a faint light flickered, a soft, flickering glow like candlelight. Aaron moved toward it slowly, every muscle in his body alert. As he reached the altar steps, a voice spoke from the shadows. "You came alone. I'm impressed." Aaron turned sharply. A figure stepped forward from behind a pillar. Tall, calm, wearing dark clothing and black leather gloves. And for the first time, Aaron saw his face. Clean-shaven, pale, mid-40s, eyes cold and almost serene. "You've been chasing ghosts for years, Detective," the man said softly. Aaron raised his weapon. "Where is she?" The man smiled faintly. "Straight to business. No small talk." "I like that. Where is Emily Carter?" Aaron demanded again. The man tilted his head slightly. "Safe," he replied. "Safe from the world that forgot her." Aaron's jaw tightened. "You abducted her. Tortured her. You murdered other women." The man's expression shifted, almost amused. "Murder is such an inelegant term," he said calmly. "I preserve beauty. I preserve memory. Society discards people every day. I give them eternity." Aaron's stomach twisted with disgust. "You're insane." The man chuckled quietly. "No, I'm devoted." Lightning flashed through the broken windows, illuminating the sanctuary in brief, violent bursts of white light. The man gestured toward a narrow hallway beside the altar. "She's through there," he said. Aaron hesitated. "Why show me?" The man stepped closer, his voice lowering. "Because you deserve to see what obsession creates." Aaron's pulse hammered as he slowly backed toward the hallway, keeping his weapon trained on the man. "Move," Aaron ordered. The man raised his hands calmly and stepped aside. Aaron moved past him cautiously, entering the dark corridor. The hallway smelled stronger of damp concrete and something else, something metallic. At the end of the corridor, a reinforced steel door stood partially open. A dim yellow light glowed from within. Aaron pushed the door slowly and froze. The room inside was small. Concrete walls, minimal furniture, and sitting in the center, chained to a chair, was a woman. Her hair was longer now, darker with age and neglect. Her face thinner, pale, fragile, but unmistakable. Emily Carter. Aaron's breath left his lungs. "Emily," he whispered. Her head lifted slowly at the sound of his voice. Her eyes blinked, unfocused at first, then widening slightly as recognition sparked. "Aaron," she whispered hoarsely. Emotion slammed into him like a physical blow. He rushed forward, dropping to his knees beside her. "It's me," he said, voice breaking. "I'm here." Tears welled in Emily's eyes as she stared at him. I thought you stopped looking," she said weakly. Aaron shook his head violently. "Never," he said. "Not once." Behind him, the killer leaned casually against the doorway, watching the reunion with quiet fascination. "Touching," he murmured. Aaron shot him a murderous glare. "You're finished," he said. The man smiled faintly. "Not yet." Aaron reached for the chains binding Emily's wrists when suddenly, a faint click echoed beneath the chair. Aaron froze. His eyes dropped to the floor. A small pressure trigger sat beneath one of the chair legs, wired into a cluster of explosives attached beneath the floor panel. Aaron's blood ran cold. The killer laughed softly behind him. "I built fail-safes," he said calmly. "Insurance policies. If you try to remove her without my permission, this entire room collapses." Emily's breathing quickened in terror. Aaron slowly raised his hands, backing away slightly. "You're sick," he whispered. "No," the man replied gently. "I'm careful." Lena's voice crackled faintly in Aaron's earpiece. "Aaron, what's happening?" "We lost visual on interior movement." Aaron swallowed hard, keeping his gaze locked on the killer. "He rigged the room," Aaron said quietly. "Explosives. Pressure trigger." Lena cursed softly over the comm. "Stall him. Tactical team is moving into position." Aaron slowly stood, stepping away from Emily. "What do you want?" he asked the killer. The man studied him calmly. "I want you to understand me," he said. "To see the world the way I do." Aaron scoffed. "You kidnap and imprison women." "I rescue them from being forgotten," the man corrected. Aaron clenched his fists. "You're delusional." The man sighed. "Perhaps," he admitted. "But tonight isn't about debate. It's about legacy." He stepped closer. "I followed your career, Aaron," he continued. "Your obsession with Emily mirrors my own devotion." Aaron's anger flared. "I wanted to save her. And I wanted to keep her," the man replied calmly. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance outside the church. The killer's eyes flicked toward the sound. "You brought backup," he said softly. Aaron said nothing. The man smiled faintly. Predictable. He reached into his jacket. Aaron tensed, raising his weapon. But instead of pulling a gun, the man produced a small remote device. Aaron's pulse exploded. "Drop it," he shouted. The man tilted his head. "You know what this does," he said calmly. Aaron's hands trembled slightly. "Don't," he whispered. The man looked past Aaron directly at Emily. "I'm sorry," he said gently. "But preservation sometimes requires sacrifice." Emily's eyes widened in horror. Gunfire erupted outside the church as tactical teams breached the building. The killer glanced toward the sound, then back at Aaron. "You were always going to ruin it," he said softly. Aaron fired. The bullet struck the remote from the man's hand, sending it skidding across the floor. The killer lunged toward Aaron, tackling him violently. They crashed into the concrete wall, fists flying, rage exploding between them. Aaron slammed the man's head against the wall, but the killer fought with terrifying calm precision. He drove a knife from his sleeve toward Aaron's chest. Aaron twisted, the blade slicing across his shoulder instead. Pain exploded through him, but adrenaline kept him moving. They struggled violently across the floor. Finally, Aaron slammed the man into a broken pillar, knocking the wind from him. Tactical officers burst into the corridor seconds later, weapons raised. "Down!" they shouted. The killer slowly raised his gloved hands, smiling faintly. Bomb technicians rushed in moments later, carefully stabilizing the pressure trigger beneath Emily's chair. Aaron sat beside her, bleeding but refusing medical attention as he held her trembling hands. "You're safe," he whispered. Emily stared at him, tears streaming down her face. "I knew you'd come," she said softly. As officers dragged the killer past the doorway in handcuffs, he paused, turning his head toward Aaron. "You still don't understand," he said calmly. Aaron glared at him. "Understand what?" The man's smile widened slightly. "I was never working alone." Aaron's heart skipped. The killer leaned closer as officers pulled him away. "You stopped one caretaker," he whispered. "There are others still preserving." Aaron stared after him, dread settling deep in his chest as thunder roared above the collapsing church roof. The nightmare wasn't over. The storm hadn't stopped by the time dawn crept over Crestwood. Rain continued to fall in cold sheets across the police barricades surrounding the abandoned church. Emergency lights flickered against soaked pavement, reflecting red and blue streaks across the shattered stained-glass windows. Inside an armored transport van, the killer sat silently in handcuffs. His name, they had learned overnight, was Dr. Victor Hale, a former grief counselor and trauma specialist who had quietly disappeared from public records nearly 8 years earlier. Aaron Malik stood outside the van, staring through the reinforced glass. His shoulder throbbed beneath fresh bandages, but he ignored the pain. All he could hear was Victor's final whisper echoing through his mind. I was never working alone. Behind him, Lena approached, holding a steaming cup of coffee. You look like you haven't blinked in hours, she said, handing it to him. Aaron accepted it, but didn't drink. Jordan finished scanning Hale's apartment, she continued. You're going to want to see this. 2 hours later, Aaron and Lena entered Crestwood PD's evidence briefing room. Files, photographs, and digital monitors covered every surface. Jordan Pike stood near the center table, eyes bloodshot but energized. Okay, Jordan said, tapping a tablet. Victor Hale isn't just a lone psycho. He's part of something organized. He pulled up a diagram on the wall monitor. It showed multiple names connected through overlapping lines. Aaron stepped closer, his stomach tightening. What is this? He asked. Jordan swallowed. A network, he said. Encrypted message boards, shared victim databases, private communication servers. It looks like a community. Lena frowned. You're saying there are others like him? Jordan nodded grimly. They call themselves caretakers. The room fell silent. Aaron studied the diagram. Each node represented a confirmed or suspected individual tied to missing persons cases across several states. How long has this existed? He asked. Jordan hesitated. Possibly decades. Aaron felt nausea twist in his gut. They're sharing victims? Lena asked quietly. Jordan nodded. And methods. Psychological manipulation. Long-term captivity strategies. Ritual preservation techniques. Aaron clenched his fists. They're helping each other avoid detection. Exactly, Jordan said. Aaron turned toward the interrogation room observation window later that afternoon. Victor Hale sat calmly at the metal table, his gloved hands replaced with sterile cuffs. Detective Aaron stepped inside alone. Victor smiled faintly. You look tired, he said. Aaron ignored the comment, sitting across from him. You mentioned others, Aaron said bluntly. Victor tilted his head slightly. I mentioned preservation, he corrected. Aaron leaned forward. How many are there? Victor chuckled softly. You're asking the wrong question. Aaron's voice hardened. Then give me the right one. Victor's eyes gleamed with unsettling calm. You should be asking, how many victims still breathe? Aaron's pulse spiked. Talk, he demanded. Victor leaned back in his chair. The caretakers believe society discards people too easily, he said. Runaways. Missing persons. Forgotten daughters. We rescue them from oblivion. Aaron's hands trembled slightly with rage. You imprison them. We protect them, Victor corrected softly. Aaron slammed his fist on the table. You tortured them. Victor's expression didn't change. Some caretakers lose their way, he admitted. But the philosophy remains pure. Aaron forced himself to stay controlled. Names, he demanded. Locations. Give them to me. Victor studied him carefully. You've already met one, he said quietly. Aaron froze. What? Victor smiled faintly. You trusted her. Aaron's heart skipped violently. Who? He demanded. Victor simply leaned back, silent. Hours later, Aaron sat in the evidence room, replaying Victor's words over and over. You trusted her. He stared at the network diagram Jordan had built. Each caretaker was labeled with limited data, aliases, and suspected locations. Aaron's eyes drifted across the names. Doctors, social workers, teachers, therapists, people whose professions gave them access to vulnerable individuals. Victor recruited them through grief support groups, Jordan explained, entering the room. He targeted professionals who dealt with trauma daily. Aaron nodded slowly. People who believed they were helping, he said. Exactly, Jordan confirmed. He radicalized them through shared ideology. Aaron swallowed hard. How many are active? Jordan hesitated. At least 9 confirmed, he said quietly. Possibly more. Meanwhile, Emily Carter remained under heavy protection in Crestwood General Hospital. 7 years of captivity had left her physically weakened and emotionally fragile. Aaron visited her room that evening. She sat by the window, wrapped in a hospital blanket, watching rain slide down the glass. You look better, Aaron said gently. Emily turned toward him, offering a faint smile. I feel real again, she said softly. Aaron sat beside her. Emily, he said carefully. Victor claimed he wasn't working alone. Did you ever see anyone else? Emily's expression darkened slightly. Yes, she whispered. Aaron leaned forward. Who? Emily stared at her trembling hands. There was a woman, she said. She visited sometimes. She helped him. Aaron's stomach tightened. Did you see her face? Emily nodded slowly. She pretended to be kind, she said. She brought me books, food, medicine when Victor punished me. Aaron's chest tightened. Do you remember her name? Emily hesitated, then nodded again. She called herself Dr. Lena Walsh. Aaron's blood turned to ice. Dr. Lena Walsh, Crestwood's leading trauma psychologist, and a frequent consultant for missing persons investigations. Aaron stood abruptly, heart pounding. Are you sure? He asked. Emily nodded weakly. She wore the same spiral pendant Victor had, she said. He called her his most loyal caretaker. Aaron left the hospital in a daze. Rain still poured across the parking lot as he reached his car. His hands trembled as he gripped the steering wheel. Lena Walsh. He had worked with her personally on 3 cases, trusted her psychological profiles, shared confidential details. His phone buzzed. It was Lena Vasquez. Aaron, we have a lead, she said. Victor's encrypted files just decrypted a partial location tag. It matches a private therapy retreat outside Crestwood. Aaron swallowed. Who owns it? He asked quietly. Lena paused. Dr. Lena Walsh. Thunder cracked overhead as Aaron sped toward the department. Inside headquarters, tactical teams scrambled into preparation mode. Maps of Walsh's retreat facility covered the operations room walls. Surveillance drones displayed aerial views of the isolated mountain property. She has underground structures, Jordan explained, pointing to heat signatures beneath the main building. Multiple life signs. Aaron's chest tightened. How many? He asked. Jordan swallowed. 6, maybe 7. Aaron closed his eyes briefly. Victims. Still alive. Lena Vasquez approached him quietly. You okay? She asked. Aaron nodded stiffly. We take her down tonight, he said. Lena studied him carefully. You worked with her, she said. You sure you're ready for this? Aaron's expression hardened. I trusted her, he said. That ends now. As tactical units loaded into armored vehicles outside, Aaron stood beneath the station's awning, rain pouring around him. He replayed every conversation he'd ever had with Lena Walsh. Every calm reassurance she had given victims' families. Every professional smile. Every piece of advice she had offered investigators. All lies. High above Crestwood, inside a secluded mountain retreat surrounded by dense pine forest, Dr. Lena Walsh stood in a softly lit observation room. Multiple surveillance screens displayed news coverage of Victor Hale's arrest. She sipped tea calmly as she watched the footage. Behind her, a reinforced steel hallway led to several locked rooms. Faint voices drifted through the corridor. Whispers. Crying. Soft singing. Lena Walsh set her cup down gently. They're coming, she murmured to herself. She walked toward a control panel mounted on the wall and pressed a series of coded buttons. Red emergency lights flickered on inside the underground facility. Automatic locks engaged. Sedation gas systems activated quietly within each holding chamber. Walsh smiled faintly. If they want to find my preserved memories, she whispered, they'll have to dig through graves first. Outside, armored police convoys sped toward the mountain road as lightning split the sky. Aaron Malik sat in the lead vehicle, jaw clenched, eyes burning with cold determination. This time, he wasn't just hunting a killer. He was hunting a network, and the night was far from over. The mountain road twisted through dense pine forest like a black serpent, slick with rain and mud. Police convoy lights sliced through the storm as armored vehicles crawled toward the isolated therapy retreat perched on the mountain ridge. Aaron Malik sat in the front passenger seat of the lead tactical vehicle, staring at the aerial blueprint displayed on a tablet in his lap. The digital overlay showed the retreat's surface structures and the hidden underground complex beneath it. 6 confirmed heat signatures. Possibly more. Each one could be a life balanced between survival and death. Lena Vasquez sat beside him, reviewing radio frequencies through her headset. Tactical teams Alpha and Bravo are in position, she said. Snipers are covering all visible exits. Aaron nodded silently. The convoy slowed as they approached the final bend in the road. Through the rain and darkness, the retreat came into view. It looked peaceful, a large lodge-style building with warm amber lights glowing behind tall glass windows. The surrounding property was landscaped carefully, stone pathways, wooden meditation decks, and carefully trimmed hedges. It looked like a sanctuary. Aaron felt disgust twist in his chest. Perfect cover, Lena muttered. The convoy stopped half a mile from the main structure. Tactical teams exited silently, moving through the forest in tight formation. Rain dampened the sound of their gear as they advanced toward the property. Jordan Pike's voice crackled through Aaron's earpiece from the mobile surveillance van. "I'm detecting automated lockdown systems activating underground," Jordan said. "Walsh knows you're coming." Aaron's grip tightened around his weapon. "Then we move faster." As they reached the retreat's outer perimeter, Aaron signaled the team to hold position. Through night vision binoculars, he scanned the lodge. Lights flickered inside, but no visible movement. "Too quiet," Lena whispered. Aaron nodded. "Stack up on the west entrance," he ordered. Inside the lodge, Dr. Lena Walsh walked calmly through the polished wooden hallway, her heels echoing softly against the floor. Red emergency lights pulsed faintly through the walls, reflecting across framed photographs of smiling patients and inspirational quotes about healing and recovery. She stopped at the underground control room, where surveillance monitors displayed thermal images of police units surrounding the property. "They're punctual," she said softly. Behind her, a young woman sat restrained in a steel chair, eyes glassy from sedation gas filtering through the vents. Walsh adjusted the ventilation settings slightly, reducing the dosage. "Don't worry," she murmured gently. "You'll sleep before the pain begins." Outside, Aaron raised his hand. "On my mark," he whispered. Tactical teams aligned beside the lodge entrance. Rain poured down as thunder rolled across the mountains. Aaron inhaled slowly. "Go." The breach was explosive. The reinforced glass doors shattered inward as tactical units stormed the building. Flashlights swept across the elegant interior, revealing abandoned furniture, overturned meditation cushions, and faint chemical residue in the air. "Clear left," one officer shouted. "Clear right." Aaron and Lena moved toward the central hallway, weapons raised. "Jordan," Aaron whispered into his comm, "locate the underground entrance." Jordan responded instantly. "Thermal mapping shows it beneath the main office suite. There's a concealed elevator." Aaron nodded. "Moving." As they reached Walsh's office, Aaron kicked open the door violently. The room looked untouched. Bookshelves lined with psychology texts. A warm fireplace crackling softly. A polished mahogany desk sat near the center. Lena scanned the floor. "There," she said. Aaron followed her gaze. A section of hardwood floor slightly misaligned near the desk. He shoved the desk aside, revealing a hidden keypad panel. Jordan's voice crackled through the comm. "I'm hacking the lock, stand by 321. The floor panel slid open, revealing a narrow elevator descending into darkness. Aaron stepped inside first. "Let's end this," he said grimly. The elevator descended slowly. Each second felt suffocating. Aaron's heartbeat pounded in his ears as the steel doors opened into a dimly lit underground corridor. The smell hit him immediately. Sedatives, antiseptic, and something older, decaying. Rows of reinforced steel doors lined the hallway. Faint coughing echoed from somewhere deeper inside. "Victims," Lena whispered. Aaron moved quickly, checking each chamber. The first door revealed a young woman unconscious inside a small medical containment room. Alive. The second door, another victim, weak but breathing. The third, a teenage girl, barely conscious, tears streaking down her face. Aaron's chest tightened as relief and fury collided inside him. "They're alive," he whispered. Suddenly, alarms blared through the underground complex. Red lights began flashing violently across the corridor. Jordan's voice shouted through the comm. "She's activating emergency purge systems. Oxygen levels are dropping underground." Aaron's pulse exploded. "She's trying to suffocate them." "Ventilation override is locked," Jordan said frantically. "You need to reach the control room manually." Aaron scanned the hallway. "Where?" Jordan pulled up thermal mapping. "End of corridor. Steel blast door." Aaron sprinted. Inside the control room, Lena Walsh stood calmly before a wall of monitors displaying oxygen levels dropping inside each holding chamber. Her expression remained serene. "They cannot suffer if they cannot breathe," she whispered. Behind her, mechanical systems hummed as gas valves released lethal sedation mixtures into the containment rooms. Aaron reached the blast door and fired 2 rounds into the locking mechanism. Tactical officers joined him, forcing the door open with hydraulic spreaders. The door burst inward. Walsh turned slowly to face them. Aaron raised his weapon. "Shut it down," he shouted. Walsh smiled gently. "You're too late," she said. Aaron fired at the control panel, shattering the ventilation interface. Sparks erupted as the system malfunctioned, halting the gas flow. Jordan's voice erupted through the comm. "Oxygen levels stabilizing. You stopped it." Aaron exhaled sharply. Walsh calmly reached for a syringe hidden inside her sleeve. Lena Vasquez reacted instantly, tackling her to the ground. The syringe skidded across the floor as officers restrained Walsh in handcuffs. Walsh didn't resist. She simply smiled up at Aaron. "You saved them," she said softly. "But preservation doesn't end with me." Aaron stepped closer, fury blazing in his eyes. "How many more caretakers are there?" he demanded. Walsh chuckled quietly. "You already know," she said. "We are everywhere grief exists." Medics rushed underground as officers began evacuating victims one by one. Stretchers filled the corridor as oxygen masks were placed over fragile faces. Aaron stood in the control room doorway, watching survivors carried past him. 6 women. 6 lives stolen for years. 6 stories waiting to be told. As Walsh was escorted past him, she leaned closer. "You trusted me too," she whispered. Aaron's jaw tightened. "That's why you lost," he said coldly. Walsh smiled faintly. "No," she said. "That's why you found us." Hours later, dawn broke across the mountain retreat as emergency helicopters lifted survivors toward hospitals. Aaron stood beside Lena, exhaustion etched into both their faces. "You did it," Lena said quietly. Aaron shook his head. "No," he replied. "We stopped 2 caretakers." He looked toward the rising sun breaking through storm clouds. "But the network is still out there." Inside a separate federal transport vehicle miles away, Victor Hale sat silently as agents escorted him toward a high-security detention facility. He stared out the window calmly as radio broadcasts announced Lena Walsh's arrest and the rescue of multiple captives. Victor smiled faintly, then leaned forward toward the agent seated across from him. "You should search deeper," he said softly. The agent frowned. "For what?" Victor's eyes gleamed. "For the caretaker you still haven't noticed." Across town, inside Crestwood Police Department headquarters, Jordan Pike sat alone in the digital forensics lab, scanning through encrypted network traffic recovered from Walsh's servers. A new encrypted message suddenly appeared on his screen. "Sender, unknown caretaker node." Jordan frowned, opening the message. The text read, "2 roots removed. The tree still stands." Jordan's heart began pounding. Then another message appeared. "And the gardener is closer than you think." Jordan froze, staring at the blinking cursor as dread crept slowly through his chest. By the time winter clawed its way back into Black Hollow, the case had already been declared closed twice. Officially, the town had buried the truth alongside the victims. The reports were signed. The files were archived. The suspects were either dead, missing, or conveniently cleared through paperwork that smelled like dust and quiet bribery. But Detective Aaron Cole knew one thing with terrifying certainty. Dead cases had a way of whispering when the wrong person tried to silence them. And Black Hollow was screaming. The snow had started falling again when Aaron unlocked the cold storage unit beneath the abandoned county courthouse. The building had been condemned years ago after structural damage, but the basement vault still functioned as overflow evidence storage. Or at least it had. Aaron's breath fogged in front of him as he stepped inside, flashlight cutting through the darkness. The air smelled stale, paper rot mixed with mildew and something older, something metallic. He moved toward locker row C. Locker C-17. The locker that wasn't supposed to exist. The locker that had been erased from every official inventory log. And yet there it stood, rusted but intact, its padlock hanging loosely, as if someone had tried to make it appear sealed without actually locking it. Aaron hesitated. His gloved fingers hovered over the metal handle as memories flooded back. The Granger family disappearance. 7 years ago, the Grangers vanished from their farmhouse on Ridgewood Road. No forced entry. No signs of struggle. Just dinner plates still warm on the table and muddy footprints leading into the woods behind their property. The case had been assigned to Sheriff Dalton and closed 2 weeks later due to lack of evidence. Aaron pulled the locker open. Inside sat 3 cardboard evidence boxes, yellowed with age, each labeled with the same case number, GH 19-04. He swallowed hard. "Let's see what you didn't want anyone to find," he muttered. The first box contained photographs. Dozens of them. Crime scene shots Aaron had never seen before. The farmhouse interior looked worse than the public records suggested. Chairs overturned. Deep scratch marks carved into the wooden kitchen floor. A shattered window that had been carefully boarded up before investigators arrived. But it was the last photograph that made Aaron freeze. It showed the Granger family portrait hanging crooked on the living room wall. Except someone had drawn over the image using black marker, for circles around the family members' faces, and beneath them, handwritten words. Not yet. Aaron's stomach tightened. He reached for the second box. The second box contained physical evidence sealed in plastic. A blood-stained tablecloth, fragments of broken glass, and a small, leather-bound notebook. Aaron carefully opened it. The first few pages were filled with children's handwriting, likely belonging to Lily Granger, the youngest daughter. Drawings of trees, houses, stick figures holding hands. Then the drawings changed. The trees grew darker, their branches twisting into claw-like shapes. The stick figures lost their faces. A tall figure appeared repeatedly, always standing just beyond the family, watching. On the final page, written in shaky red crayon, were 3 words. "He comes nightly." Aaron felt a cold shiver crawl up his spine, because he had seen those exact words before, written on the wall of the abandoned mine, where 2 of the Black Hollow victims had been found last year. He opened the third box slowly, bracing himself. Inside lay a stack of audio tapes, cassette recordings labeled with dates leading up to the Grangers' disappearance. Aaron stared at them, heart pounding. He hadn't seen a working cassette player in years, but he knew exactly where to find one. 30 minutes later, Aaron sat alone in his apartment, the old tape player humming softly on his kitchen table. Snow battered the windows outside, the wind howling like something alive. He inserted the first tape. "Press play." Static crackled. Then a woman's voice emerged, soft, trembling. Recording log. April 3rd. "This is Margaret Granger. Sheriff Dalton told me to document everything we've been hearing at night." Aaron leaned forward. Footsteps echoed faintly in the background of the recording. Margaret's voice lowered. "It started 3 nights ago. Scratching sounds, like someone dragging something heavy across the porch." The audio crackled. Then a faint knocking noise echoed through the recording. 3 slow taps. Margaret gasped softly. "That's it again. It only happens after midnight." The tape ended. Aaron sat motionless, his pulse racing. He inserted the second tape. The second recording began with frantic breathing. Margaret sounded terrified. "He's closer now. I saw him tonight, standing by the tree line. He doesn't move, he just stands there." A man's voice interrupted her, her husband, Daniel. "You're imagining things, Maggie." "No," she whispered. "He's real. Lily sees him too." Then came a sound that made Aaron's blood run cold. A child's voice whispered near the microphone. "He says he's coming inside soon." The tape cut abruptly. Aaron rubbed his temples, trying to steady his breathing. He inserted the final tape. The label read, April 14th, night of disappearance. The tape hissed before Margaret's voice returned, barely audible. "He's in the house." Furniture crashed in the background. Glass shattered. Someone screamed. Daniel shouted something Aaron couldn't fully understand. Then came a voice Aaron had never heard before. Low. Distorted. Almost mechanical. "You were chosen long before you knew it." Margaret sobbed. "Why us?" Silence lingered for several seconds. Then the voice responded. "Because Black Hollow belongs to the ones who keep its secrets." The recording ended with a deafening crash. And silence. Aaron sat frozen, staring at the tape player as if it might suddenly speak again. The room felt smaller, colder. His phone buzzed on the table, breaking the silence. It was a text from Lena Park, the investigative journalist who had been helping him dig into Black Hollow's buried crimes. "Lena, you need to see this. Now." Aaron called her immediately. "What did you find?" he asked. Lena's voice sounded breathless. I broke into Dalton's old storage locker at the sheriff's office. Aaron stood up instantly. And I found financial records, she said. Large deposits made into Dalton's account over 15 years. From who? That's the thing, Lena whispered. The payments came from a foundation that technically doesn't exist anymore. Aaron's chest tightened. Name? There was a long pause. Then she spoke. The Hollow Preservation Society. Aaron's hand tightened around the phone. He had heard that name before. Once. 7 years ago. During his first week working in Black Hollow. The society had been described as a historical preservation group responsible for maintaining the abandoned mine sites and older properties around town. But when Aaron had tried researching them later, every record had vanished. Lena, he said slowly, who runs it now? Another pause. I think, she said, you already know the answer. They met outside the shuttered Hollow Historical Museum 30 minutes later. Snow blanketed the parking lot, muting every sound except the crunch beneath their boots. Lena handed Aaron a folder filled with printed documents. Board member listings, transaction logs, photographs of meetings. Aaron flipped through them, his stomach sinking. Every page pointed to one name, Mayor Richard Hale. Aaron stared at the museum building, its tall stone pillars looming through the snowfall. Why would the mayor fund Sheriff Dalton? He asked. Lena crossed her arms, trying to stay warm. Control. Silence. Cover-ups. Take your pick. Aaron flipped to the last document. It showed a faded photograph from 20 years earlier. A group of men stood outside the Black Hollow mine entrance. Dalton was there, much younger. So was Hale. And standing between them, a third man. Tall. Thin. His face partially obscured by shadow. Aaron's heart skipped. Do you recognize him? Lena asked. Aaron nodded slowly. That's Dr. Victor Crane. Lena frowned. The anthropologist who disappeared in the mines back in 2003? Aaron nodded again. He wasn't studying history, Aaron said quietly. He was studying burial patterns, ritual sites, underground chamber systems. Lena's eyes widened. You think Black Hollow isn't just hiding crimes? She asked. Aaron stared at the photograph. I think, he said, it was built on them. Suddenly, headlights flooded the parking lot. A black SUV rolled slowly toward them. Aaron and Lena exchanged tense glances. The vehicle stopped just feet away. The engine idled quietly. Then the driver's door opened. Mayor Richard Hale stepped out. Snowflakes clung to his dark overcoat as he approached them calmly. I wondered how long it would take you to, Hale said smoothly. Aaron's hand instinctively moved toward his holstered gun. Careful, detective, Hale said, smiling faintly. Violence tends to complicate negotiations. Lena stepped forward. You paid Dalton to bury evidence. You covered up multiple disappearances. Hale sighed, as if disappointed. You're seeing only fragments of a much larger picture, he said. Aaron's jaw tightened. Then explain it. Hale studied them both, his expression unreadable. You believe Black Hollow is a town, he said quietly. It isn't. Snow swirled violently around them as the wind picked up. This place, Hale continued, is a gate. It has been for over a century. Every generation, someone must maintain the balance. Keep certain truths buried. Offer certain sacrifices. Lena's face paled. You're insane, she whispered. Hale tilted his head slightly. Am I? He asked calmly. Then tell me, detective, why do you think every investigator who dug too deep either vanished or died mysteriously? Aaron felt ice settle in his veins. Because someone killed them, he said. Hale smiled faintly. Yes, he said. Someone did. The mayor stepped closer, his voice lowering. And now, he said, you're standing exactly where they once stood. Aaron's grip tightened on his weapon. Behind Hale, the SUV's passenger door slowly creaked open. A tall silhouette stepped out. Aaron's breath caught in his throat. The figure moved forward, stepping into the falling snow. Its face remained hidden beneath the shadow of a wide-brimmed hat. But Aaron recognized the shape instantly. The same silhouette Lily Granger had drawn. The same figure described in Margaret's recordings. The same presence whispered about in every unsolved case tied to Black Hollow. Hale gestured toward the figure calmly. Detective Aaron Cole, he said softly. Meet the guardian of Black Hollow's secrets. Aaron's pulse thundered in his ears as the figure took another step forward, and for the first time since reopening the case, Aaron realized he might not live long enough to close it. The wind howled through Black Hollow's museum courtyard, carrying snow like shards of broken glass across the frozen pavement. Detective Aaron Cole stood frozen, his hand hovering over his holster, his mind racing as the tall, shadowed figure stepped forward. The silhouette moved slowly, deliberately. Each footstep sounded heavy, unnatural, as if the ground itself resisted the figure's presence. The brim of the wide hat concealed its face, but Aaron could feel its gaze locking onto him like an invisible vice tightening around his chest. Mayor Richard Hale watched calmly, his hands folded behind his back, his expression eerily peaceful. "You've done impressive work, Detective," Hale said, his voice almost proud. "Far more than most who've come before you." Aaron forced himself to breathe evenly. "Then tell me the truth," Aaron demanded. "All of it." Hale nodded slowly, as if he had expected that response. "The truth," he said, "is older than this town. Black Hollow wasn't founded for farming, or trade, or settlement. It was built over a fracture in the earth, a place where something beneath the surface leaks upward." Lena Park stood beside Aaron, gripping her camera like it was the only thing grounding her to reality. "You're talking like this is some kind of cult," she said. Hale shook his head gently. "No," he replied. "Cults worship what they don't understand. We maintain what we do." The shadowed figure took another step forward. Aaron's instincts screamed danger. "Who is it?" Aaron asked, his voice steady but tense. Hale turned slightly toward the figure. "It has had many names," he said. "In early records, it was called the Keeper. Later, settlers called it the Witness. Sheriff Dalton preferred a simpler term." Hale paused. He called it the Balance. The figure finally lifted its head slightly. For a split second, moonlight broke through the storm clouds above, revealing part of its face. Aaron's breath caught. The skin looked pale, almost wax-like. Its features appeared human but wrong. Too smooth. Too still. And its eyes, they reflected light like polished stone. Not blinking. Not moving. Just watching. Aaron slowly drew his weapon, keeping it aimed low. "What does it want?" he asked. Hale's smile faded slightly. "It doesn't want anything," he said. "It enforces." Lena shook her head in disbelief. "Enforces what?" Hale gestured toward the snow-covered town skyline behind them. "For over a century, Black Hollow has prospered while neighboring towns collapsed," Hale explained. "Floods avoided us. Fires died before spreading. Economic crashes barely touched us." Aaron's stomach turned as realization began forming. "You paid for protection," he said quietly. Hale nodded once. "Yes." Lena's voice trembled. "With people." Hale didn't respond immediately. His silence answered for him. The figure moved closer. Aaron felt an overwhelming pressure build in his ears, like descending underwater too quickly. The air grew colder, heavier, suffocating. "You've uncovered too much," Hale said calmly. "Which leaves us with only one question." Aaron didn't lower his weapon. "And what's that?" Hale's eyes darkened. "Will you accept the truth and become part of the system that protects this town?" Lena stared at him in shock. "You're asking him to help you murder people." Hale's tone remained patient. "I'm asking him to preserve thousands of lives by sacrificing a few." Aaron's jaw clenched. "You sound exactly like every criminal who thought they were justified." The figure stopped only 10 feet away now. Aaron could hear something faint coming from it. A whispering sound. Not words. More like multiple voices layered together, speaking just beyond comprehension. His head throbbed. Images flickered through his mind. Crime scenes. Victims. Children's drawings. The Granger family. Every unsolved case tied to Black Hollow. They overlapped like shattered mirrors reflecting the same nightmare from different angles. Aaron staggered slightly. "What is it doing?" he muttered. Hale spoke softly. "It's showing you history," he said. "Every offering. Every protection. Every bargain that kept Black Hollow standing." Aaron dropped to one knee as the visions intensified. He saw settlers gathered around torchlit ritual circles deep inside the mine tunnels. He saw Sheriff Dalton standing beside Hale, dragging unconscious victims toward underground chambers. He saw Dr. Victor Crane discovering ancient carvings beneath the mine, and realizing too late what they described. Sacrifice cycles. Blood exchange. The keeper standing at the center of it all. Watching. Judging. Accepting. Aaron screamed as the images flooded faster, louder, more violent. Then suddenly, they stopped. He gasped, collapsing into the snow, his head pounding. The keeper tilted its head slightly, studying him. Hale stepped closer. "You understand now," he said gently. "You've seen the truth no outsider ever survives learning." Aaron slowly pushed himself upright. His mind raced. His heart pounded. And then, he started laughing. Hale blinked, clearly caught off guard. Aaron's laughter grew louder, echoing across the courtyard. "You think I'm going to help you?" Aaron said, breathless. Hale's expression hardened. "You don't have a choice," he said quietly. Aaron wiped snow from his face, his eyes burning with fury. "Every victim you sacrificed, every family destroyed, you call that balance?" Hale's voice sharpened. "I call it survival." Aaron raised his weapon, aiming directly at Hale's chest. "I call it murder." The keeper stepped forward instantly. Aaron fired. The gunshot exploded through the storm. But the bullet never reached Hale. It stopped midair, suspended, floating. The keeper raised one pale hand slowly, and the bullet dropped harmlessly into the snow. Lena gasped behind Aaron. Aaron's heart sank. "You cannot fight it," Hale said calmly. "None of them ever could." The keeper stepped closer again, towering over Aaron now. Its stone-like eyes locked onto him. The whispering voices returned, louder this time, pressing against his skull. Aaron fell backward, clutching his head. The voices blended into something clearer. A message. A demand. Then suddenly, another voice emerged within the chaos. Soft. Childlike. Familiar. Aaron froze. He recognized it instantly. Lily Granger. "He doesn't belong to them," her voice whispered inside his mind. More voices followed. Victims. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Their whispers overlapped, rising into a deafening chorus. "He sees the truth. He remembers us. He won't continue the cycle." The keeper froze. Its expressionless face twitched slightly, like something inside it had faltered. Hale's calm composure cracked for the first time. "No," he said sharply. "That isn't possible." The whispers grew louder. Stronger. The snow around them began swirling violently, forming a spiraling vortex that wrapped around the keeper's body. Aaron felt warmth surge through his chest, replacing the crushing pressure in his skull. He realized something horrifying and powerful. The keeper wasn't just enforcing the cycle. It was bound by it. And the victims were part of that binding. "Stop this!" Hale shouted, panic finally breaking through his voice. The keeper staggered slightly as cracks began forming across its wax-like skin, thin fractures glowing faintly beneath the surface. Aaron forced himself to stand. "You're not balance," he shouted at the figure. "You're a prison built from their suffering." The whispers turned into a roar. The cracks spread rapidly across the keeper's body. Hale lunged forward desperately. "You'll destroy everything," he screamed. "The town will collapse." Aaron didn't hesitate. Then maybe it deserves to. With a thunderous sound like ice shattering across a frozen lake, the keeper's body split apart. Light erupted from within, blinding, violent, overwhelming. A shockwave blasted outward, knocking Aaron and Lena across the courtyard. The museum windows shattered instantly. Streetlights exploded in cascading sparks across town. And then, silence. The storm vanished. The snow stopped falling. The air turned still. Aaron slowly pushed himself up, his ears ringing. Where the keeper had stood, there was nothing. No body. No shadow. Only melted snow forming a dark circle on the pavement. Hale collapsed to his knees nearby, his face pale with horror. "You've doomed us," he whispered. Aaron stared at him coldly. "No," he said. "You doomed yourselves the moment you chose human lives as currency." Sirens echoed in the distance. Dozens of them. Lena had already called state authorities hours earlier. Insurance Aaron had insisted on before confronting Hale. Red and blue lights flooded the town streets as state police vehicles raced toward the museum. Hale looked around frantically, realizing his empire of secrecy had collapsed. "You don't understand what's coming," he whispered. Aaron crouched beside him, his voice low. "Neither do you," he said. "But at least it'll be honest." 6 months later, Black Hollow looked like a completely different town. Investigations uncovered decades of disappearances tied to Hale, Dalton, and the Hollow Preservation Society. Arrests spread across multiple state departments, exposing layers of corruption nobody believed possible. The abandoned mine tunnels were sealed permanently after authorities discovered ritual chambers carved deep beneath the earth. And Black Hollow started falling apart. Businesses closed. Families moved away. Strange sinkholes began appearing near the outskirts of town, swallowing roads and farmland. But something else happened too. For the first time in recorded history, disappearances stopped. Aaron stood outside the now-shuttered sheriff's office, watching moving trucks haul away boxes of archived case files. Lena joined him, holding 2 cups of coffee. "You did it," she said softly. Aaron shook his head. "No," he replied. "They did." He glanced toward the mountains surrounding Black Hollow, toward the sealed mine entrance hidden beyond them. He could still feel faint echoes inside his mind. Not whispers anymore. More like distant memories. Watching, remembering, but no longer trapped. Lena studied him carefully. "Do you think it's really over?" she asked. Aaron took a slow sip of coffee, exhaling into the cold air. "I think," he said, "some secrets stay buried because they're dangerous." He paused. "But some need to be unearthed, no matter the cost." Behind them, a demolition crew prepared to tear down the Hollow Historical Museum, the final monument to a town built on sacrifice. Aaron turned away as the first wrecking ball slammed into the stone facade, sending dust and shattered history collapsing into the street. And as Black Hollow's darkest legacy crumbled into rubble, for the first time since arriving in town, Detective Aaron Cole finally felt the dead grow quiet. Story 2. The small town of Ravenswood prided itself on being quiet. So quiet, in fact, that the kind of darkness that lived in basements, attics, and the spaces between neighbors' walls often went unnoticed. It was on a bitter February evening when Detective Olivia Kane first felt that quiet wasn't natural. She had been called to a narrow, ivy-covered street at the edge of town, a neighborhood where streetlights flickered and the snow lingered long after it had disappeared everywhere else. The call had come from a teenage girl named Sophie Whitman, who had reported hearing strange noises from the abandoned house next door. The house had been empty for years, ever since the wealthy but reclusive Harrison family vanished without explanation one cold winter night. Olivia parked her unmarked car at the end of the street. The air smelled faintly of wet pine and something metallic beneath it. She stepped out, boots crunching in the thin layer of ice, and surveyed the 2-story Victorian home. Its paint was peeling, windows frosted and cracked. Shadows seemed to crawl across the siding, cast by the flickering streetlights. Sophie was waiting, bundled in an oversized jacket, clutching her scarf like a lifeline. Her wide eyes darted toward the darkened windows of the Harrison house. I think they're still in there," Sophie said, her voice trembling. "Voices. Whispering. At night. I've seen lights too. Sometimes moving. But the doors are locked. Always locked." Olivia knelt down to meet her eyes. "You're not imagining it. I'm going in to check. Can you stay here?" Sophie nodded mutely, shivering. Olivia drew her flashlight and approached the front door. It was sealed with a heavy padlock, but the old lock clicked easily under her picks. Someone had tampered with it recently. She stepped inside. Dust motes floated in the air, illuminated by the narrow beam of her flashlight. Every step on the wooden floorboards groaned like a voice protesting intrusion. The house smelled of damp decay, old fabric, and something else, something faintly sweet and cloying that made her stomach turn. The living room was frozen in time. A fireplace sat cold and empty, framed by faded floral wallpaper. Chairs were overturned. A piano with yellowed keys leaned against the wall. Olivia scanned the space. Then she heard it, a whisper. A soft, urgent voice, barely audible, coming from above. From the attic. Olivia's pulse quickened. She reached for the narrow staircase that led upward. Each step creaked under her weight. The whisper became a faint chorus, almost pleading. At the top of the stairs, the attic hatch loomed. Olivia hesitated, feeling a chill crawl down her spine. Whoever, or whatever, was inside was aware of her presence. She lifted the hatch. The attic was dark, cramped, and filled with boxes, trunks, and old furniture stacked like a small forest. The whispering stopped the moment she entered, and then she saw the first clue, a small, blood-stained journal sitting on an overturned trunk. Its cover was leather, cracked with age. Inside, in shaky handwriting, were entries detailing a life slowly consumed by fear. The first line chilled her to the bone. They come at night. They never leave. I can't escape them, not even in my dreams. Olivia's flashlight swept across the attic. In the far corner, a shadow shifted, something alive but impossibly still. She froze, heart hammering, and whispered, "Show yourself." No response. But the air grew heavier, as if the house itself was breathing, waiting. And for the first time in her career, Olivia realized that this case, this house, was unlike anything she had ever faced. Somewhere in the shadows, someone or something was watching, and it had been waiting for years. The next morning, Ravenswood looked deceptively ordinary. Snow sparkled on the eaves of shuttered homes, smoke drifted lazily from chimneys, and children's laughter echoed faintly through the streets. To anyone passing by, it was a town that existed peacefully, untouched by the dark history lurking in its shadows. But for Detective Olivia Kane, there was no ordinary here. Not anymore. She returned to the Harrison house, this time accompanied by a forensics team and her partner, Detective Marcus Vance. Marcus, a tall man with an easy smile and eyes that missed nothing, surveyed the house with a practiced caution. "Olivia," he said, rubbing his hands together to ward off the cold. "If there's anyone alive in there, they've been hiding for years. Or worse, someone else is already using this place." Olivia didn't respond. She stepped onto the creaking porch and glanced at the broken windows, their frost-covered panes like opaque eyes staring back at her. "We don't know what we're dealing with yet. That journal, it's our only lead." The forensics team spread out, photographing every surface, bagging dust, taking air samples. Olivia and Marcus made their way upstairs to the attic. The attic door had been left open, the journal resting on the trunk where Olivia had found it. She picked it up again, turning the pages slowly. The handwriting was uneven, almost frantic. The whispers, they're always near. I can feel them moving through the walls, behind the floors. Mother says it's my imagination, but I know better. They watch. They wait. One day they will take me too. Olivia felt a chill. This person, they were terrified, and someone or something was tormenting them. Marcus crouched beside her, examining the floorboards. There's evidence of recent activity. Footprints in the dust, disturbed boxes. Someone's been here in the last few weeks. Olivia's flashlight swept across the attic. Her beam caught a faint outline in the corner, a small, child-sized figure huddled behind an old wardrobe. She froze. "Hello," she called softly. The figure didn't respond. Olivia stepped closer. Marcus followed, weapon ready. Then the figure bolted, darting through the attic door and down the stairs. "Stop!" Olivia shouted, sprinting after it. They reached the bottom of the staircase and found themselves in the living room. The figure had vanished. Only a faint trail of footprints in the dust remained. Marcus bent down to inspect them. Small shoes. Definitely a child. But no one lives here, and no one should be here. Olivia's mind raced. Maybe Sophie saw more than just lights and whispers. Maybe this isn't just a haunted house. Maybe someone's been living here, or hiding here for years. By mid-afternoon, Olivia had secured the Harrison property with police tape and set up surveillance cameras around the perimeter. She returned to the station to review the town's old records. The Harrison family had been prominent in Ravenswood decades ago. Wealthy, reclusive, and highly secretive, they lived on the edge of town in that imposing Victorian house. Public records showed them as having vanished one night in 1985. Police reports at the time claimed there was no forced entry, no signs of struggle, no bodies. Just gone. Olivia flipped through old newspaper clippings, yellowed and brittle. Harrison's missing in Ravenswood mystery. Vanishing of local family leaves town baffled. Search fails to locate missing Ravenswood family. But one article caught her attention. A photograph of the Harrison family on the front lawn, smiling for the camera. There were 5 of them, parents Edward and Margaret Harrison, and 3 children, Lily, Samuel, and Claire. Olivia's stomach tightened as she noticed something unsettling. A figure in the background, blurred but unmistakable. A tall man wearing a wide-brimmed hat, standing behind the family as if observing them. Her hand trembled. What the hell? That evening, Olivia and Marcus returned to the Harrison property. The snow had begun again, falling heavily, muffling all sound. They moved cautiously through the house, their flashlights slicing through the darkness. Marcus paused in the hallway near the stairs. I keep thinking about that figure in the photo, the one behind the Harrisons. It looks unnatural. Olivia frowned. I saw it too. But photos don't lie, someone was watching them. Maybe from inside the house. They reached the attic once more. The journal lay open on the trunk, the last entry almost illegible. Tonight they come closer. I can feel them breathing through the walls. I hear their whispers, they say my name. I'm scared. I'm scared. They want me gone. They'll take my soul. Olivia's heart thumped violently. She set the journal down and turned, sweeping her flashlight across the attic. Then she noticed it, a trapdoor concealed beneath a stack of old rugs. It had been hidden perfectly. Marcus joined her, his eyebrows raised. I don't like this. Attics are creepy enough without secret basements. Olivia pried open the trapdoor. It revealed a narrow, spiral staircase descending into darkness. A fetid odor rose from below. Careful, she whispered, gripping her weapon. Stay close. They descended slowly. Each step echoed, bouncing off the stone walls of the underground chamber. When they reached the bottom, Olivia's flashlight revealed something that made her blood run cold. A small, dimly lit room, walls lined with shelves containing hundreds of old, dust-covered jars. Each jar held something. Human hair, fingernails, eyes preserved, teeth, small fragments of clothing. Marcus took a step back. Jesus, what is this? Olivia's mind raced. Evidence of a serial killer, or a ritual. Something inhumane. Her flashlight landed on the far corner of the room. A small bed, made neatly, with a child-sized jacket draped over it. It looked freshly used. A soft giggle echoed through the chamber. Both detectives froze. I told you they were here, a whisper said from the shadows. The voice was small, childlike, but every hair on Olivia's arm stood on end. Then the shadows moved. A girl stepped into the beam of their flashlights. Pale, thin, with wide, terrified eyes. Her hair was matted. Her clothes tattered. She pointed a trembling finger at Olivia. They watch, they never leave, she whispered. You can't take them away. Olivia swallowed hard. Who are they? What are you talking about? The girl shook her head violently. The shadows. They live in the walls. They remember everything. They take us if we disobey. Marcus stepped forward. Olivia, this is insane. Olivia didn't respond. She watched the girl, realizing that this was no ordinary case of a missing family or haunted house. Something had lived here. Something had tormented the Harrisons for years. And somehow it had survived. The girl led them deeper into the basement, through a maze of narrow tunnels that smelled of damp earth and decay. The walls were etched with scratches, hundreds, maybe thousands, carved over decades. Some looked like tally marks. Others were more elaborate. Symbols Olivia didn't recognize, shapes that seemed almost alive in the flickering flashlight beam. This way, the girl whispered, tugging Olivia's hand. They entered a larger chamber, circular, stone-lined. In the center was a pedestal, and atop it a book. Ancient, bound in cracked leather, with strange markings on the cover. Olivia picked it up cautiously. Dust puffed into the air. The pages were yellowed with age, but the words, they made her skin crawl. Spells? Ritual instructions? Names of victims? Dates spanning decades? Her flashlight flickered. Shadows seemed to move independently along the walls. A low hum filled the room, vibrating through the stone floor. The girl clutched her shoulder. You shouldn't have come. They will know. Olivia realized the truth instantly. This wasn't just a serial killer. Not just a haunted house. Ravenswood itself had been a trap, a container for something older, something intelligent. And now she had opened the wrong door. Back upstairs, the snowstorm raged harder. The wind rattled the windows as if warning them away. Olivia and Marcus emerged from the basement, carrying the book carefully. Outside, Sophie waited, shivering in the snow. Her eyes widened as she saw the detectives climb the porch steps. You found her, Sophie whispered. Olivia nodded slowly, keeping the book close. We found her, and we found what's been hunting this town for decades. Sophie swallowed hard. Will it come back? Olivia didn't answer immediately. She looked at the shadows cast by the house, flickering under the streetlights. Something inside that house was waiting, patient and calculating. Finally, she said, her voice low and firm. We'll stop it, or we'll die trying. And for the first time since stepping into Ravenswood, Olivia Kane felt the weight of what she was truly facing. A nightmare that had been alive long before her, and one that would not let the town, or her, go easily. Detective Olivia Kane couldn't sleep that night. The wind outside Ravenswood howled against the window pane like an angry animal, but it was nothing compared to the storm raging in her mind. The book they had recovered from the Harrison house weighed heavily in her hands, even while closed. Its ancient leather cover seemed to hum faintly, as if alive. She lay on her small apartment couch, staring at the ceiling. Every shadow in the room seemed to stretch unnaturally toward her, creeping across the walls like invisible fingers. Every creak of the building, the faucet turning on in the apartment above, the scrape of her neighbor's chair, made her flinch. She knew the shadows from the Harrison house weren't just the tricks of a child's imagination. They were real, terrifyingly real, and they were patient. Morning came too soon. Olivia dressed quickly, pulling on her coat and boots, and met Detective Marcus Vance outside the precinct. His expression was grim, coffee cup in hand, as if he had spent the night replaying the previous day's horrors in his head. "You didn't sleep much either, huh?" Olivia asked, voice hoarse. Marcus shook his head. "Not a minute. I keep thinking about that basement. Those scratches, the book, and the girl. Something has been living there for decades. Something that shouldn't exist." Olivia nodded. "We need to figure out exactly what we're dealing with before it kills again." They drove to the Ravenswood Historical Society, hoping to find old maps, property records, and any documentation about the Harrison family and their land. The building smelled of must and varnish, the air thick with decades of dust. Inside, they were greeted by Margaret Lyon, the elderly archivist who had worked at the society for over 40 years. "You're here about the Harrison house?" she asked, squinting. "I knew someone would eventually come looking. Some things are better left alone." Olivia exchanged a glance with Marcus. "We don't have the luxury of leaving things alone, Mrs. Lyon. People have been disappearing. Something is in that house, and it's still alive." Margaret sighed and motioned for them to follow her into a back room lined with cabinets of yellowed files and ledgers. The Harrisons were strange, yes, but what people don't understand is that the family came from a long line of guardians. Their ancestors were what you might call scholars of the old ways. They believed Ravenswood was special. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Special how?" Margaret leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Special in the sense that it held secrets older than the town itself. There are fissures, if you will, in the land here. Strange energies, unnatural events. And some families, like the Harrisons, were tasked with keeping certain things from escaping." Olivia felt a shiver run down her spine. "Keeping things from escaping? Like what?" "The shadows," Margaret whispered. "You've seen them, haven't you?" Olivia swallowed hard. "Yes." Margaret nodded. "Then you already know more than most. Those shadows, they're not spirits, not exactly. They are echoes of the past. Memories of pain, of violence, of death given form. They are to wear. They feed on fear and isolation, and they will manipulate anyone foolish enough to enter their domain. The Harrisons tried to contain them, but eventually they were overwhelmed." Olivia's heart pounded. "Overwhelmed? You mean, that's what happened to the family?" Margaret hesitated. "Partly. Records were lost. Evidence disappeared. Official reports claimed the family vanished without a trace. But anyone with knowledge, anyone who could recognize the patterns, knew the truth. The shadows claimed them. Slowly, systematically. They watched. They waited. And now, you've entered their house. You've seen the evidence. And the girl, she's a survivor." Olivia and Marcus left the Historical Society, weighed down by Margaret's words. Every street, every building, even the sky seemed darker than before. Back at the precinct, they pored over old newspaper clippings, town records, and any information they could find about disappearances over the past 50 years. The pattern was undeniable. Small groups of children, adolescents, occasionally adults, all vanishing near the Harrison property. No bodies. No witnesses willing to talk. A perfect history of erasure. Olivia leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples. "This isn't just a haunted house. This is an ecosystem of fear. The shadows aren't random, they're strategic. They're intelligent." Marcus nodded slowly. "And the girl, she's the only one who's survived. Somehow. She's been hiding here all these years. Or, Olivia said, frowning, maybe the shadows let her survive for a reason. She might hold the key to understanding them. That night, Olivia and Marcus returned to the Harrison house with plans to secure the basement and study the book further. Snow had blanketed the streets again, muffling their footsteps. The house loomed like a sentinel of the past, its windows' dark eyes watching their approach. They made their way into the basement carefully, flashlights cutting through the darkness. The girl, whose name they learned was Clara, was waiting in the chamber, her small body trembling. "They will come," she whispered. "They don't like people reading the book." Olivia knelt down beside her. "Clara, we need your help. We need to know what they want." The girl's eyes filled with tears. "They want attention. They want to be remembered. If someone forgets them, they get angry." Marcus shivered. "They feed on fear, but they also crave memory. That explains the preserved things in the jars, their reminders. Evidence of the pain they've caused and the control they've maintained." Olivia flipped open the ancient book. Symbols glowed faintly in the light of her flashlight. The language was unfamiliar, archaic, but patterns emerged. Instructions for rituals, lists of names, dates, and locations. But some pages were torn, scribbled over, or faded almost beyond recognition. "This is centuries old," Olivia murmured. "And somehow they've been continuing it." Clara pointed to a corner of the room. "There's a door behind the stones. You have to move them carefully. But they're hiding something." Olivia and Marcus worked together, removing loose stones to reveal a narrow passageway. The air that escaped was colder, heavier, thick with the scent of iron and decay. They exchanged glances. "This leads deeper," Marcus said, shining his light into the darkness. Olivia nodded. "We go together. No one gets left behind." They descended into the passageway, the walls lined with more jars and artifacts. Whispers began faintly at first, almost like the wind. Then they grew louder, layering over each other in a chorus of incomprehensible voices. Olivia felt her stomach knot. Clara clung to her arm, whispering, "They know you're here." Suddenly, the passage opened into a vast underground chamber. The ceiling arched like a cathedral, its stone walls carved with symbols Olivia had never seen. At the center of the room stood a massive structure, a combination of altar and pedestal, surrounded by shadows that flickered and twisted unnaturally. Olivia stepped closer. Her flashlight illuminated dozens of faces etched into the shadows, children, adults, all frozen in expressions of terror. Some seemed almost human, others were grotesque, their features distorted by fear. "Their memories," Olivia whispered. "Captured here, trapped here." A sudden movement made them all freeze. One shadow detached itself from the wall, coalescing into a tall, humanoid figure. Its face was featureless, smooth as marble, and it radiated cold, silent menace. Clara whimpered. "It's the one that started it all, the first shadow. It never leaves. It waits." Olivia and Marcus exchanged a look. This was no ordinary haunting. This was a being, an intelligence that had endured for generations, feeding on the fear and pain of Ravenswood's children. The shadow advanced, moving slowly, deliberately, its presence warping the air around it. Olivia raised her flashlight, shaking. "We're not leaving until we understand what you are." The shadow paused. Then, in a voice that seemed to echo from every wall at once, it spoke. "You remember. You remember all who came before you. And now you will learn why." The chamber trembled. Dust fell from the ceiling. Whispers multiplied, filling every corner of the room. The shadows writhed, stretching toward them like living tendrils. Olivia realized with horror, Ravenswood had been a feeding ground for this entity for centuries. And now that she had entered its domain, she could no longer leave untouched. The first whispers began forming words she could understand. They broke the rules. They forgot the debt. They must pay. Marcus gripped Olivia's arm. "What do we do?" he asked. Olivia looked down at Clara, who shivered violently. "We learn. We fight. And we survive. Because if we fail," she swallowed hard, staring at the writhing shadows, "there will be no one left to remember Ravenswood at all." The shadows surged closer. The chamber was alive with their presence. Olivia raised the book, flipping through the pages. Symbols glowed faintly, as if responding to her touch. "This is our only chance," she whispered. And in that moment, Detective Olivia Kane realized that the horrors of Ravenswood were only beginning. and the past, in all its darkness, had a voice that demanded to be heard. The underground chamber beneath the Harrison house hummed with a life all its own. Shadows twisted in unnatural shapes along the walls, forming fleeting images that seemed almost human. Faces frozen in fear, mouths open in silent screams, eyes wide with the memory of torment. The air was thick and damp, carrying the metallic tang of old blood and decay. Olivia Kane's flashlight barely cut through the darkness, its beam trembling as her hand shook. Clara, the young girl who had survived years hidden in the house, clung to Olivia's arm, trembling. Her small body radiated terror and fatigue, yet her eyes were wide with a strange intensity, as though she understood more than anyone had the right to. Olivia bent to her, speaking softly. "Clara, I need you to tell me everything. The shadows, the rituals, the family, what really happened here." The girl swallowed hard, her lips quivering. "They come at night. They whisper. Sometimes they speak my name. I've seen them take people. My brother, my friends, they never come back. I hide, but they always know. They know where I am. I'm the only one left." Marcus Vance, standing behind Olivia, scanned the chamber, his expression grim. "The jars, the artifacts, the book. This isn't just some supernatural nonsense. There's logic here, some method to it. Someone was controlling this, maintaining it over the decades." Olivia nodded, her mind racing. "Or maybe it controls itself now. It's become autonomous. That's why it's still here, why it survived the Harrisons disappearing. They weren't the source, they were only caretakers." She turned her gaze back to the massive pedestal at the center of the chamber. The book they had retrieved glowed faintly, as if reacting to her presence. Symbols shifted on the page, lines forming words that seemed to float just beyond comprehension. She felt a pull, a magnetism emanating from the text that made the hair on her arms rise. Marcus cleared his throat. "Olivia, look at the walls." Olivia's flashlight swept across the carvings etched into the stone. They weren't random. They were part of a pattern, geometric shapes intertwined with symbols, tally marks running in long sequences, and in some areas faces, sketched grotesquely, their expressions frozen in silent screams. "They're like a map," Olivia murmured. "Or a record. Every name, every person a memory. Stored here." Clara's small hand rose, trembling. "They remember everything," she whispered. "Every pain, every death. They know who touches the book, who reads the walls, they remember you too." Suddenly, the shadows along the walls flickered and coalesced, forming a humanoid figure. Unlike the other shadows, this one seemed more solid, more deliberate. Its featureless face radiated an intelligence that chilled Olivia to her core. The air thickened, carrying a low, vibrating hum that pressed against their eardrums. The girl whimpered. "It's the first one, the oldest. It watches, it judges, it remembers everything." Olivia's heart pounded. "We need to understand it. There has to be a way to communicate." The shadow moved forward slowly, tendrils of darkness rippling from its form, brushing against the walls, the jars, even the book. The whispers began, soft at first, unintelligible, then growing louder, clearer, overlapping voices forming words. "Trespassers, dead unpaid, you must remember." Marcus gritted his teeth. "It's trying to communicate. Maybe it wants something from us." Olivia nodded. "Or it wants us to fail." She flipped through the book carefully, the symbols shifting beneath her fingertips. Some pages were easier to decipher than others, containing lists of names and dates, detailed instructions for rituals, and references to anchors and keepers. One page stood out, a diagram that appeared to map the underground chambers, showing hidden rooms and secret passageways. "This is it," Olivia murmured. "There's more to this place than we know. These passages, they lead deeper." Marcus peered over her shoulder. "Deeper? How much further can this go? This house already has layers we didn't even know existed." Olivia didn't answer. Her attention was on the symbols etched into the walls of the chamber. One phrase repeated itself over and over, carved faintly along the perimeter. "Memory binds the keeper. Blood sustains the shadow. Fear fuels eternity." Her stomach turned. The shadows weren't just sentient. They were dependent on the suffering of Ravenswood's residents. They were living archives of pain, growing stronger with each act of terror and neglect. Clara stepped closer, her voice barely audible. "If you go deeper, you might not come back. The shadows, they don't like outsiders. They feed on the living. Olivia placed a reassuring hand on the girl's shoulder. We'll be careful. We have to find out how this started and how to end it. As they moved toward the spiral staircase leading to a lower level, the shadows reacted violently. They surged, twisting and writhing like living smoke, tendrils reaching for them. Olivia felt the pull, cold, oppressive, almost physical. Marcus grabbed her arm, pulling her back. It's too strong, he said, voice strained. We can't go further like this. Not yet. Olivia took a deep breath, forcing herself to steady her shaking hands. We have to. If we don't understand it, people will keep disappearing. Ravenswood will keep bleeding. With Clara leading the way, they descended the narrow staircase into what appeared to be an even larger underground labyrinth. The walls were rough-hewn stone, damp and slick, and the air grew colder with every step. The whispers followed them, echoing off the walls in multiple directions, sometimes clear, sometimes incomprehensible. They reached a massive cavern, larger than anything Olivia had imagined. The ceiling arched high above, disappearing into darkness. Shadows clung to every surface, stretching and twisting unnaturally. In the center of the cavern was a pit, black as pitch, from which emanated the faintest glow, like eyes opening in the dark. Olivia's flashlight illuminated movement at the edges of the cavern. Small figures, hunched and crawling, emerged from the shadows. They were human, once human, but their eyes were hollow, their movements jerky, unnatural. The whispers intensified, forming a chaotic chorus. Prisoners, Clara whispered. They were taken, trapped here. Olivia swallowed hard. This is worse than I imagined. Marcus stepped closer, voice low. How many are there? Clara shook her head. Too many to count. Some have been here longer than I've lived. Some never knew life outside. They've forgotten everything except fear. Olivia realized something horrifying. The shadows weren't just intelligent. They were collectors, archivists of suffering, maintaining the memories of their victims as part of their existence. The jars, the carvings, the rituals. It was all a system, a machine of terror that had grown unchecked for decades. Her eyes landed on a shadow near the pit, a humanoid form larger than the others, face featureless, radiating an almost palpable intelligence. It moved deliberately toward her, and the whispers coalesced into words she could finally understand. You remember. You carry the weight of Ravenswood now. Will you join, or will you break the chain? Olivia's breath caught. She glanced at Marcus, who shook his head in disbelief. We don't join, Olivia said firmly. We end it. Whatever this is, it dies here. The shadow seemed to respond, tilting its head, studying them. The whispers escalated, forming a cacophony that made the cavern itself vibrate. The human-like figures began to move, their jerky steps advancing toward Olivia, Marcus, and Clara. Olivia clutched the book tightly. Symbols glowed faintly on the pages, almost as if the text itself recognized the presence of the shadows. Her mind raced. This was their leverage, their way to understand, maybe even control, the entity. We have to use the book, Olivia said urgently. It's a guide, a record. Maybe it tells us how to end this. Clara nodded weakly. But it's dangerous. They know. Olivia's eyes met Marcus's. We have no choice. If we fail, the shadows will keep feeding, the victims will never be free, and Ravenswood will be lost. The shadows surged closer. The whispers became voices, distinct and numerous, overlapping in a horrifying chorus. Trespassers, dead unpaid, remember, pay remember. Olivia stepped forward, opening the book to a section marked with strange symbols. The air thickened, the shadows recoiling slightly from the light of the pages. She began reading aloud, her voice trembling but firm. Words she didn't understand in full, words that seemed older than the world itself, spilled from her lips. The shadows twisted and writhed violently, the human-like figures stumbling backward as if repelled. The cavern vibrated with energy, a low hum growing into a roar. Clara clutched her ears, screaming, Stop! They're angry. They're going to hurt us. Olivia ignored her fear. She turned another page, revealing a diagram, a ritual, an incantation designed to sever the shadow's connection to the living world, to release the prisoners from the pit. The instructions were cryptic, dangerous, and required precision. One misstep could trigger unimaginable consequences. Marcus studied the diagram. We can do this. Carefully. Step by step. We follow the book exactly. Olivia nodded, determination hardening in her eyes. We don't have a choice. We either free them, or this darkness consumes Ravenswood entirely. The shadows recoiled again, hissing, whispering, threatening. But Olivia's voice grew stronger, reading from the book with conviction. Marcus and Clara followed her lead, moving precisely as instructed. The cavern shook violently. Dust and debris fell. Shadows screamed, some fleeing into the darkness, others dissipating entirely. Light began to filter into the pit, illuminating the imprisoned figures, some waking, some crying, all confused but alive. Olivia's voice echoed, the final words of the incantation reverberating through the chamber. The shadows writhed one last time, then exploded outward in a blinding flash of light. When Olivia blinked, the cavern was quiet. The human-like prisoners were free, huddling together in the center of the chamber. The darkness that had dominated the room was gone. Olivia sank to her knees, exhausted but alive. Marcus sat beside her, staring at the pit in disbelief. Clara hugged her knees, tears streaming down her face, whispering, "It's gone. They're gone." Olivia's eyes scanned the cavern. The symbols on the walls had faded. The jars were empty, the artifacts crumbled to dust. For the first time in decades, Ravenswood had no shadows, no whispers, no prisoners trapped in the darkness. But even as relief washed over them, Olivia felt the weight of what they had uncovered. The Harrison house, the shadows, the book. This was just one chapter in Ravenswood's long history of darkness. Something ancient had been contained here, and although they had won this battle, the town itself had been forever changed. She rose slowly, brushing dust from her coat. "We've freed them," she said softly, "but we need to ensure this never happens again. This book, this house, it can't be left here." Marcus nodded grimly. "Agreed. Ravenswood will need protection, oversight, someone to remember what happened here." Clara looked up at Olivia, eyes wide and fearful, yet filled with hope. Will anyone remember me?" Olivia knelt, resting a hand on the girl's shoulder. "I will, and I promise you will never be alone again." Outside, the first rays of sunlight broke over Ravenswood, glinting off the snow and washing the town in light. For the first time in decades, the streets were quiet, but no longer oppressive. The shadows were gone. The whispers had ended. And somewhere deep inside the Harrison house, the book sat open on the pedestal, its glow faint but still present. A reminder that Ravenswood's darkness had been faced, survived, and contained for now. The morning after the basement incantation, Ravenswood felt different. Not just quiet, but almost fragile, like the town was holding its breath, waiting to see if the darkness they had battled had truly been expelled. Snow lay thick on the streets, glinting like shards of glass in the weak winter sun. But beneath the surface, the town carried wounds that had been ignored for decades. Detective Olivia Kane arrived at the precinct early, carrying Clara, who had barely slept. The girl clung to Olivia's hand like a lifeline, eyes still wide from the previous night's horrors. Marcus Vance followed close behind, coffee in hand, exhausted but alert. Olivia sat at her desk and opened the book. The pages had cooled, the glow fading into the yellowed leather. The symbols still lingered faintly, reminding her that the shadow's influence was not entirely gone. She traced her fingers over the lines, realizing the text held more than incantations. It was a record, a catalog of the lives affected by the shadows, a ledger of pain. "Olivia," Marcus said, lowering his voice, "we need to start figuring out who's missing, who's alive, who isn't. The girl says she's the only survivor, but that doesn't make sense. Over decades, there had to be more than one." Olivia nodded. "We'll cross-reference town records, old missing persons cases, the newspaper archives, anything we can find. If the shadows have been active for that long, we need to know who they took and who survived." Hours passed as Olivia and Marcus pored over records dating back 50 years. There were hundreds of disappearances, children, adolescents, even adults who had vanished without explanation. Many had been written off by the authorities as runaways, accidents, or untraceable relocations. Few had been investigated thoroughly, but patterns began to emerge. Most of the disappearances were clustered around the Harrison property, often occurring during the winter months. Many of the victims had familial ties to Ravenswood, but others were outsiders, lost children, transient families, or visitors who had wandered too close. Olivia's eyes caught a name that made her pause. Thomas Greer, age 11, disappeared 1976. The case had been officially closed with no evidence found. But the photo in the archive showed a boy with wide, frightened eyes. The same eyes she had seen reflected in Clara's. The same fear she had felt in the shadows of the Harrison house. "Marcus," she said, pointing, "look at this. There's a connection, not just geographically, but temporally. December, January, every disappearance happened during the cold months. And every family had some mention of odd behavior before the vanishings. Fear, whispering, insomnia. It's like the shadows were growing stronger during that season." Marcus leaned over her shoulder, frowning. "And Clara survived because she hid? Or because they wanted her alive for some reason?" Olivia nodded slowly. "Exactly. She's the key. She remembers. She survived for a purpose, maybe even to help end this." By midday, they had mapped out a timeline of the Shadow's activities, cross-referencing all missing persons cases. It became clear that the Shadows weren't indiscriminate. They targeted children primarily, often isolating them from families first. The artifacts in the jars, the carvings in the walls, and the rituals documented in the book were all mechanisms to maintain control, preserve memories, and feed on fear. Clara sat quietly, listening as Olivia and Marcus discussed the findings. Her small hands fiddled nervously with the edge of her coat, and occasionally she shivered despite the warmth of the precinct. "They took my friends first," she whispered. "Then the others. I hid in the attic. I didn't want them to see me. But sometimes I could hear them crying. Sometimes. I think they're still there. I think the shadows keep them somewhere." Olivia's heart tightened. "Clara, we freed everyone in the basement, remember? But there might be more. Some could be hidden elsewhere. The shadows, they were clever. They could have spread their influence across multiple locations in town." Marcus frowned. "We need to check every abandoned building, every property the Harrisons owned or visited. We need to be systematic. If any victim is still alive, we have to find them." Their investigation led them first to an abandoned schoolhouse on the edge of Ravenswood. According to old records, the Harrisons had purchased it in 1963 and allowed it to fall into disuse over the years. As Olivia and Marcus stepped through the rusted gates, the chill in the air felt heavier than the cold should have warranted. Inside, dust coated the floors and broken furniture lay scattered. Olivia's flashlight illuminated the walls, again carvings. Faces etched into the plaster, tally marks scratched into the wooden boards. The patterns were similar to those in the Harrison house, but smaller, subtler, almost invisible to anyone who didn't know what to look for. Clara shivered. They were here too," she whispered. "This is where some of them stayed. They hide. The shadows, they feed, but they also watch." As they explored further, Olivia noticed a trapdoor beneath the stage. She and Marcus exchanged a look. "Here we go again," Marcus muttered. They pried it open, revealing a narrow passage leading underground. The smell of damp earth and decay filled their nostrils. Flashlights cut through the darkness as they descended into a small cellar, walls lined with shelves similar to the Harrison house basement, but this one was less organized. The jars were empty, the carvings less elaborate, but the presence was unmistakable. The air vibrated with whispers, faint, fragmented, almost like echoes of long-forgotten voices. Then Olivia noticed movement. Small figures crouched in the shadows, human shapes, but frail, pale, malnourished. Eyes wide and terrified, reflecting her flashlight's beam. Clara gasped softly. They survived. They hid it like I did." Olivia knelt, speaking gently. "It's okay. We're here to help. You're safe now." The children, frightened but instinctively trusting Clara, stepped forward. One by one, Olivia and Marcus guided them out of the cellar. Each child told stories of hiding, whispers in the night, and shadows that moved through walls. They had been alone, surviving in secret for years, forgotten by the world above. One boy, no older than 14, whispered, "The shadows, they wait. They'll come back if we forget them." Olivia nodded solemnly. "We won't forget. You're all safe now. You have people who will protect you." Back at the precinct, the rescued children were bathed, fed, and given warm clothing. Social services arrived to take over care, but Olivia remained close, documenting every detail of their accounts. Each story added pieces to the puzzle, The shadows' methods, their victims, the timeline of horrors. Marcus observed quietly, noting how Clara moved among the children, comforting them, guiding them. "She's remarkable," he said softly. "After everything, she's still caring." Olivia smiled faintly, though her eyes were weary. She survived because she had to. And now, she might be the reason we understand all of this. She remembers what the rest of us never could. As evening fell over Ravenswood, Olivia returned to the Harrison house one last time. The snow lay thick across the yard, undisturbed. The shadows were gone, but the book remained, still glowing faintly atop the pedestal. She approached it carefully, tracing the cover. "This book," she murmured. "It's a record, but it's also a warning. Whoever tries to exploit fear, whoever dares to awaken it, this is what will happen." Suddenly, her flashlight flickered and she froze. For a brief moment, she thought she saw a shadow at the edge of the room, a flicker of movement that didn't belong. But when she blinked, it was gone. Olivia shivered. Even though the shadows had been defeated, she knew this. Ravenswood's darkness was not entirely gone. It had been contained, weakened, but the memory of it, the knowledge, remained. And those who had survived, the forgotten ones, the children, Clara, would carry that memory forever. She took a deep breath, stepping back from the pedestal. "We did what we could. Now we make sure it never returns." Outside, the sun dipped behind the hills, casting long shadows across the town. But for the first time in decades, Ravenswood's residents, those who had survived and those yet to remember, had a chance at life beyond the darkness. And somewhere, deep in the snow-covered woods, a faint echo whispered, a reminder that even when shadows are defeated, the memory of their existence never truly dies. The days following the rescue of the forgotten children were a whirlwind of activity. Ravenswood had shifted from the suffocating grip of fear to a fragile, cautious relief. News crews had descended, but Olivia Kane and Marcus Vance kept them at bay, unwilling to reveal too much. The town wasn't ready for the truth yet, not fully. And the children, most of whom had known only the shadows, needed safety, stability, and time to process what had happened. Olivia spent the mornings at the precinct, cataloging testimonies and analyzing the book. Clara stayed close, now slightly more relaxed but still wary. The girl had a way of listening, absorbing details with an intensity that unsettled Olivia. She seemed to carry the weight of Ravenswood on her small shoulders, a weight that no child should bear. Marcus, meanwhile, combed through historical archives and property records, cross-referencing the Harrison holdings with every unexplained disappearance. The patterns became more complex with each discovery. Hidden rooms, buried journals, coded letters, an entire system of secrets stretching back generations. "This town," Marcus muttered one afternoon, rubbing his temples, "it's like a puzzle that's been half buried. The shadows, the Harrisons, all of it has been playing out for decades. But there's something more. Something we're missing." Olivia looked up from the book. The rituals, the artifacts, the victims, they all point to a purpose. The shadows weren't random. They weren't just chaos. They were collecting, preserving, maintaining control. But what for? Marcus shrugged. "Maybe we'll never know. Maybe the purpose was survival itself, feeding on fear, keeping the line of power alive. But I have a feeling the Harrisons weren't just caretakers. I think they were part of a larger network." Olivia frowned. "A network?" "Exactly. There are gaps, people missing from the records, correspondences that suggest others were involved. People outside Ravenswood, people who knew of the shadows, who helped maintain them, or perhaps profited from them." That night, Olivia returned to the Harrison house. The book still rested on the pedestal, glowing faintly, as though it remembered her presence. She ran her fingers along the leather cover, tracing the symbols, and opened to the pages documenting the Harrisons' rituals. Names, dates, locations, it was all there. But interspersed with the ritual instructions were cryptic notes, scribbled in a hand that didn't belong to any Harrison she had seen before. Her heart quickened. Whoever had written these notes had intimate knowledge of the shadows, the rituals, and the book itself. Whoever they were, they had been part of the operation. But who were they? A sudden noise made Olivia jump. The house creaked and groaned under its own weight, but it wasn't just the building. A whisper, soft and deliberate, came from the shadows that clung faintly to the edges of the room. "You are too late, but not entirely." Olivia froze. The shadows had been weakened, dispersed, but some fragment of consciousness remained, and they were aware of her presence. Clara, who had followed silently, whispered, "They know you're here. They always know." Olivia nodded, steeling herself. "We're going deeper. There's more to learn. And if we don't uncover it, someone else could fall prey to this darkness." The next morning, Olivia and Marcus returned to the Historical Society. Margaret Lyon, the archivist, had been reluctant to speak in detail before, but now she sensed that the detectives were serious. She guided them to a back room, pulling down maps and letters from shelves coated in decades of dust. "These are letters," Margaret said, "between the Harrisons and others who knew of the shadows. I've been keeping them hidden. Some of these names, they weren't residents. They were scholars, occultists, people who believed they could harness what the Harrisons were containing." Olivia scanned the letters. Dates, coded phrases, references to anchors and keepers, mentions of rituals performed outside of Ravenswood. It all suggested a far-reaching network. "Someone else," Olivia whispered, "someone outside this town has been manipulating or at least supporting these shadows. That explains why they were so persistent. That explains why they survived despite our efforts." Margaret nodded grimly. "Yes, and they're still out there. You've weakened them, yes, but the knowledge remains. And knowledge is power." That evening, Olivia decided to revisit the first locations of disappearances in the outskirts of Ravenswood. She wanted to understand the victims' lives, not just the mechanisms of the shadows. Each home, each school, each park held traces of the past. Olivia and Marcus spoke to families who still remembered, piecing together fragments of childhood stolen, lives disrupted, and the long silence that followed. One house stood out, a small cabin on the edge of a frozen lake. According to the records, the youngest Harrison sibling had been sent there as part of a ritual, years before the final disappearances. The cabin was abandoned now, the windows boarded, but inside, the air was thick, oppressive. Symbols were carved into the walls, faded but still visible. Marcus ran his fingers along one line of symbols. These matched the book. The rituals weren't confined to the house, they were practiced elsewhere too. The shadows didn't just feed here, they were anchored here. Olivia felt a chill. Anchored, that means they could return. Anywhere these anchors exist, the shadows could regrow. We have to find them all. The wind outside howled, rattling the cabin. Shadows seemed to stretch along the walls, faint echoes of what once was. For a moment, Olivia thought she saw a face, a small boy, eyes wide with fear. Then he vanished. Clara's voice broke the silence. "They're watching. They never stop watching." Days turned into weeks. Olivia and Marcus traced every anchor, documented every ritual site, and interviewed survivors wherever they could be found. The picture that emerged was horrifying. The shadows had been maintained deliberately, sustained over decades by the Harrisons and their network. Children had been sacrificed to strengthen the entities. Families had been manipulated, coerced, or frightened into compliance. Ravenswood itself was a carefully curated feeding ground, a laboratory of terror. Clara, despite her youth, began helping them. Her memory of the shadows, the rituals, and the Harrisons' instructions proved invaluable. She could recognize patterns, decipher cryptic phrases, and identify hidden chambers. Olivia marveled at the child's resilience, yet she couldn't help but notice the weight on Clara's small shoulders, the burden of remembering horrors most adults could not comprehend. One evening, Marcus called Olivia over to a map of the town. "Look at this," he said, tracing lines with his finger. "Every anchor, every disappearance, every ritual site, it forms a network. And there's one area we haven't touched, the old Harrison estate north of town. It's been abandoned, sealed off, but it's huge. If the shadows have a core, it's probably there." Olivia's stomach tightened. "We go there next. We end this completely, once and for all." The night they prepared to enter the estate, Olivia reviewed the book with Clara by her side. The child's small fingers hovered over the pages, tracing the symbols with care. "Do you understand what we're doing?" Olivia asked softly. Clara nodded. "Yes. We stopped them. But they won't go quietly. They'll fight, and they might try to scare us." Olivia smiled faintly, brushing Clara's hair back. "I know, but we're ready. We've learned their patterns, their weaknesses, and we have each other." Marcus joined them at the door, flashlight and gear in hand. "It's now or never. Once we enter, there's no turning back." But if we succeed, Ravenswood finally has a chance. The estate loomed ahead, dark and silent, snow crunching beneath their boots. Windows were boarded, gates rusted, yet the air around the property felt alive, charged. Olivia felt it, the pull of something ancient and intelligent. The shadows weren't just memories now, they were waiting, preparing, anticipating. Olivia took a deep breath, holding Clara's hand firmly. Marcus stepped beside her. Let's finish this. Together, they crossed the threshold into the estate, the wind whipping around them. The house was enormous, far larger than any single family should have occupied. Hallways stretched into darkness, and the scent of age and decay was overpowering. Symbols were carved into doorframes, stairs, and even the walls of the main hall, an ominous welcome to intruders. As they moved deeper, Olivia realized the magnitude of what they were facing. This wasn't just a house, or even a network, it was the very heart of the Shadow's existence. Anchors, artifacts, rituals, all culminated here. And at the center, she knew, lay the secret that had sustained Ravenswood's darkness for decades. Somewhere in the shadows, the whispers began. Faint at first, almost inaudible, then growing, overlapping, echoing through the halls. You cannot end what you do not understand. You cannot escape what has been preserved. We are eternal. We are. Ravenswood. Olivia swallowed hard, gripping the book tightly. The time for preparation was over. The time to face the core of the darkness had come, and in that moment, she realized one horrifying truth. Whatever lay at the heart of the Harrison estate, whatever entity had been feeding and watching for generations, it knew they were coming, and it would not let them leave alive. The Harrison estate stretched endlessly into the night, its sprawling wings disappearing into shadow. Olivia Kane, Marcus Vance, and Clara stood at the grand entrance, flashlights cutting narrow beams into the dark. Snow crunched beneath their boots, each step echoing unnaturally in the stillness. A cold wind whistled through broken window panes, carrying whispers that made Olivia's skin crawl. "Stay close," she whispered. Clara nodded silently, clutching Olivia's hand. Marcus adjusted his flashlight, scanning the walls of the main hall. Symbols covered every surface, etched deep into wood and stone. Some glimmered faintly, almost alive, as if sensing their intrusion. Olivia took a deep breath, holding the book tightly. Every page, every symbol, every ritual they had studied now pointed to a single conclusion. The heart of the shadows, their central anchor, was somewhere inside this estate. It had been carefully maintained, strengthened over decades, and it was aware of them. The front hall was massive, vaulted ceilings looming high above. Dust and cobwebs covered every surface, but there were signs of recent activity. Footprints pressed into the snow-dusted floor, and small disturbances in the dust where someone or something had passed. Clara froze. "They know we're here," she whispered. "They've been waiting." Marcus frowned. "It's like the shadows themselves are alive, tracking us." Olivia nodded grimly. "They are alive, and this is their nest." They moved cautiously, descending a staircase to the basement. The air grew colder, heavier, almost suffocating. The walls were carved with hundreds of faces, some screaming, some hollow-eyed. Their whispers were faint at first, then coalesced into a low, vibrating hum that pressed against the detective's eardrums. At the center of the basement, a large circle had been etched into the stone floor, symbols glowing faintly. Candles, long extinguished, lay scattered around, and at the center, a pit gaped open, black as ink. From within, faint whispers and occasional movement hinted at something alive, waiting. Olivia's heart pounded. "This is it," she said. "This is where it all began. Whatever the Harrisons were preserving, it's here. And we're going to end it." They descended into the pit carefully, using the book to guide them. The walls of the chamber were slick with moisture, and strange, ancient symbols covered every surface. Olivia's flashlight revealed small jars on shelves, each containing faintly preserved remnants, objects, hair, even small bones. Some shimmered with a faint, unnatural glow. Clara's eyes widened. "They've been collecting everything." Marcus swallowed. "This is beyond anything we imagined. The Harrisons didn't just feed the shadows, they curated them, preserved them, made them eternal." A sudden movement caught Olivia's eye. A shadow flickered along the wall, coalescing into a humanoid figure, taller and more imposing than any they had seen before. Its face was featureless, but its presence radiated intelligence and malice. The whispers grew louder, forming words. Trespassers dead unpaid, the keeper must remain. Olivia felt a chill run down her spine. It's the core, the oldest shadow, the one that binds the others. Marcus raised his flashlight, illuminating the figure fully. Its form pulsed, tendrils of darkness extending outward, touching the walls, the jars, even the book. The air vibrated with energy, oppressive and suffocating. Clara stepped closer, her small voice trembling. It knows us. It sees everything we've done. Olivia nodded. We have to use the book. It's the only thing that can weaken it. Opening the book, Olivia found the section detailing the original ritual to sever the anchor. The instructions were complex, requiring precise movements, spoken incantations, and the placement of symbolic objects. Any mistake could result in catastrophe, either death or the strengthening of the shadows. Marcus leaned in. We follow the instructions exactly, step by step. No improvisation. Olivia nodded, taking a deep breath. She began reciting the incantation, her voice steady despite the fear curling in her chest. The symbols on the floor and walls began to glow, responding to her words. The shadow writhed violently, tendrils flailing as if resisting. Clara helped, identifying symbols and pointing out details Olivia might have missed. Here, move the jar to the left, like this, she cried. The shadow shrieked, a sound that was not human, echoing off the chamber walls and vibrating through the floor. Dust and debris swirled violently as the core tried to reassert itself, tendrils reaching toward them with unnatural speed. Olivia's voice rose, louder and more confident, the words from the book flowing naturally now. Marcus followed her instructions precisely, moving jars and symbols as directed. The air thickened, the shadows around the pit writhing and screaming. Suddenly, a tendril lashed out, striking Marcus in the shoulder. He stumbled, dropping one of the jars. Olivia reacted instantly, grabbing Clara and moving her out of harm's way. The shadow recoiled slightly, giving Olivia the chance to continue the incantation. Almost there, she muttered, voice straining. Hold steady, don't falter. The core pulsed violently, then surged upward like a tidal wave of darkness. The tendrils whipped toward the ceiling, slamming against the walls, shattering jars and scattering debris. Clara clung to Olivia, eyes wide as the shadows screamed. Olivia's voice cracked as she reached the final words of the incantation. The symbols on the floor blazed with intense light, and the shadows writhed, twisting, then exploded outward in a blinding flash. The force of the release knocked Olivia, Marcus, and Clara to the ground. When Olivia opened her eyes, the chamber was silent. The shadows were gone, the oppressive weight lifted. The jars were empty, the walls bare. Even the air felt lighter, almost breathable for the first time in decades. They helped each other to their feet, shaken but alive. Marcus looked around in disbelief. It's over. They're gone, Clara whispered, still clutching Olivia's hand. All of them? The shadows, they won't come back. Olivia knelt, brushing her hair from Clara's face. Not if we make sure. The anchors are broken, the ritual's ended. This place is empty for now, but we'll have to remain vigilant. Evil like this doesn't disappear entirely, it only waits. Marcus surveyed the chamber one last time. We've weakened them. We've freed those who were trapped. But you're right, we need to ensure no one else ever continues what the Harrisons started. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and silent. The estate, massive and imposing, seemed less threatening now, like a relic of a past era. The darkness had been defeated, but Olivia knew that history had a way of repeating itself if left unchecked. They emerged from the estate, blinking in the pale winter light. Clara paused, looking back at the house. It feels empty, she said softly. Olivia smiled faintly. It is, and that's how it should be. Ravenswood has a chance to heal now. But we must remember, always remember, what happened here, so it never returns. As they walked back toward the town, the whispers of the shadows faded completely, replaced by the soft crunch of snow beneath their feet. For the first time in decades, Ravenswood felt free. But deep in the woods beyond the estate, a faint shimmer of darkness lingered, almost imperceptible. A reminder that even defeated shadows leave echoes, and even in victory, vigilance is eternal. The morning after the final confrontation at the Harrison estate, Ravenswood seemed almost normal. Snow blanketed the streets, streetlights glinted on the frozen sidewalks, and smoke curled lazily from chimneys. Yet beneath the surface, the town was fractured, like a cracked mirror reflecting both relief and lingering terror. Survivors and families alike struggled to reconcile the horrors of the past with the present calm. Detective Olivia Kane returned to the precinct early, accompanied by Clara. The girl no longer clung to her as tightly as before, but her eyes remained vigilant, scanning every shadow and corner. Marcus Vance arrived soon after, weary but determined, carrying stacks of records and notebooks. "We need to document everything," Marcus said as he laid out the files. "Every ritual, every victim, every shadow sighting, before memories fade or people forget." Olivia nodded. "And we need to go beyond the immediate evidence. Survivors' memories may hold details the book didn't record, locations, rituals, other participants. We can't afford to miss anything." Clara spoke quietly, almost to herself. "Some memories hurt. They shouldn't even exist, but they do." Olivia placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "I know, Clara, but remembering is the first step toward stopping it from happening again." The first group of survivors they interviewed were the children rescued from the secret basements around the town. Most were fragile, pale, and terrified, having endured years of isolation. Their recollections were fragmented, but each fragment painted a terrifying picture of life under the shadow's influence. A boy named Samuel described the shadow's tactics in chilling detail. They weren't just shadows," he whispered. "They spoke. They whispered our names. If we made a sound, if we tried to run, they would wrap around you, pull you down." Clara's face went pale. "That's how I survived," she whispered. "I hid very still, even when they were close. But some, they didn't make it. They couldn't hide." Olivia wrote furiously. Each survivor added names, dates, locations, and peculiar details. Rooms that moved, objects that vanished and reappeared, and symbols etched where no one had been able to see them. It was becoming clear that the shadow's reach had been far more extensive than initially suspected. Marcus leaned back in his chair. The Harrisons weren't the only ones involved. Some of these children mentioned people, adults, strangers, helping maintain the rituals, performing ceremonies. "There's a network we've barely begun to uncover." Olivia frowned. "A network outside of Ravenswood?" Marcus nodded. "Or at least people passing through. Outsiders who knew, who contributed or profited. If the shadows were fed consistently over decades, there had to be more than one caretaker." As the day wore on, Olivia and Marcus visited sites of past disappearances, mapping locations and gathering more evidence. Each place told a story: abandoned cabins, long-forgotten schools, shuttered homes. All had been anchors for the shadows at one point. Symbols etched in walls and floors bore patterns identical to those in the Harrison estate, suggesting careful replication of the ritual sites. Clara followed closely, guiding them to subtle clues invisible to most. "Look," she said softly, pointing to a series of scratches on a wooden post. They left messages, warnings, or instructions, something for people who came after them. Olivia examined the marks. The Harrisons and the shadows, they expected successors. They expected someone to follow, to maintain the darkness. And the network Marcus mentioned, it may have been their plan all along. That evening, they returned to the precinct with stacks of maps, photographs, and survivor testimonies. The sheer volume of data was overwhelming, but patterns began to emerge. Many of the shadow-related events occurred in cycles, often during the winter months when the snow isolated the town. Victims were chosen carefully, usually children or the vulnerable, and their fear strengthened the shadows. Olivia realized something terrifying. Even though the main anchor had been destroyed at the estate, the remnants of the network still existed. Individuals who had participated in the past could still attempt to reignite the darkness, using surviving knowledge and artifacts. A week later, Olivia received a call from a woman named Eleanor Graves, claiming to have information about the shadow's influence outside Ravenswood. Eleanor's voice was frantic, trembling, yet firm. "They followed me here," she said. "I grew up in Ravenswood, but I escaped. Some of the adults I knew, they weren't human. They were shadows in disguise, feeding. I have proof. Records, journals, objects. And there are others. They're still alive. They're waiting." Olivia agreed to meet her. Eleanor led them to a cabin deep in the forest, one that had been overlooked in their initial survey. Inside, the cabin was packed with old journals, artifacts, and drawings. Some matched symbols in the book, others were new, detailing rituals performed in secret, outside of Ravenswood, and instructions for maintaining shadow influence over victims. Marcus sifted through the artifacts. This confirms it. The Harrisons weren't the only ones. This network, it's broader than we imagined. They trained others. They created successors. Eleanor added, voice trembling. And some of them are still alive, still practicing. They're waiting for the next opportunity to awaken the shadows. Olivia's jaw tightened. We stopped the core, yes, but if this network exists, if they regroup, all we've done could be undone. We need to find them and stop them permanently. Over the next several days, Olivia, Marcus, Clara, and Eleanor worked tirelessly. They cross-referenced the new artifacts with historical records and survivor accounts, slowly reconstructing the network's structure. The deeper they dug, the more horrifying the revelations. Some adults in town had unknowingly participated, influenced by fear or manipulation. Certain families had multiple generations tied to the rituals, unaware of the full extent. The network was global in concept. Letters and journals hinted at similar activities in towns miles away, even outside the country. Clara, despite her youth, began cataloging memories and symbols herself. Olivia watched the child's meticulous work with awe and concern. You're incredible, Clara, but it's a lot to bear. Clara looked up, eyes fierce. I remember because I have to. If we forget, they'll come back, and no one else will survive. The night they decided to confront the largest remaining anchor site, they returned to the old church on the outskirts of Ravenswood. For decades, it had been abandoned, the pews rotted and the steeple crumbling. But signs of activity remained. Symbols carved into the altar, faint footprints in dust, and a pervasive cold that seemed unnatural. Inside, they discovered hidden chambers beneath the floorboards, containing journals, remnants of rituals, and small cages where children had once been kept. The evidence was meticulous, terrifying in its precision. As they documented the site, Clara's voice broke the silence. They tried to erase themselves here. They didn't want anyone to remember. But the memories, they survive in me. Olivia nodded. And you're helping us bring them to light. That's how we end this. Suddenly, a shadow flickered across the far wall, faint, almost imperceptible. Not like the core they had destroyed, but a ripple, a fragment of what had once been. Olivia felt a shiver run down her spine. They're still here, Marcus said, voice low. Even without the core, fragments of the shadows remain. We need to be careful. As dawn approached, the team emerged from the church, exhausted but resolute. They had uncovered decades of secrets, traced the network's influence, and documented countless survivors. Yet Olivia knew the fight wasn't over. The shadows, though weakened, had left an imprint on Ravenswood that could never be fully erased. Clara looked up at Olivia, eyes weary but determined. We can stop them. I can help. We won't let them take anyone else. Olivia knelt, placing a hand on the child's shoulder. You've already helped more than anyone could have imagined. And together, we'll make sure Ravenswood, and the world beyond, remembers, so they can never rise again. Outside, the sun rose over the town, illuminating the snow and the streets. Ravenswood was still fragile, still fractured, but the first light of hope had returned. Survivors would rebuild. Memories would be honored. And the shadows, though lingering in fragments, had been diminished to whispers. Yet even as Olivia watched the sunlight glint on the snow, she couldn't shake the feeling that the echoes of the past were far from finished. Somewhere hidden fragments of the network remained, waiting, watching, and remembering. And Olivia knew one thing with certainty. The fight to protect Ravenswood, and the memory of its victims, was far from over. Winter in Ravenswood had taken on a strange duality. On the surface, the town appeared peaceful. Snow fell silently on empty streets, chimneys puffed smoke into a pale morning sky, and the children rescued from the Harrisons' basements were slowly reintegrating into families or foster care. But beneath the calm, a persistent unease lingered, as if the town itself remembered the horrors it had endured. Detective Olivia Kane spent her mornings combing through the newly discovered journals and artifacts. Marcus Vance continued his exhaustive cross-referencing of the network's known participants, while Clara, increasingly confident, helped piece together fragmented memories from survivors. Each day brought revelations, but also more questions. One recurring pattern haunted Olivia. Though the core had been destroyed, remnants of the shadows had persisted. Small, almost imperceptible manifestations, flinches in the shadows, whispers in empty rooms, chills in the air, suggested that the network's influence had not been entirely eradicated. It was Marcus who first noticed a disturbing detail. "I've been analyzing survivor accounts and historical records," he said one afternoon, spreading a series of maps and documents across Olivia's desk. "Look at this. There are consistent anomalies, events and disappearances that didn't directly involve the Harrisons, but follow the same ritual patterns. And they're clustered around certain families and businesses that are still active in Ravenswood." Olivia frowned. "You're saying someone is still active? Someone is still using the shadows?" Marcus nodded grimly. "Or they were waiting, laying low. We know the network extends beyond the town. Correspondence shows coordination with outsiders. I think someone in Ravenswood was meant to keep the system alive, should the main anchor ever be destroyed." Clara's small voice trembled. "You mean someone planned this all along? That the shadows could come back?" Olivia placed a hand on her shoulder. "Yes, Clara, but we'll find them before that happens. We won't let them rebuild." Their investigation led them first to the families most closely tied to the Harrisons' influence. Subtle clues emerged, old letters hidden in attics, journals tucked behind floorboards, and coded messages and photographs. Every discovery pointed to the same chilling reality. The network had never truly been dismantled. It had merely gone dormant, waiting for the right conditions to reactivate. One lead brought them to a local historian named Dr. Leonard Finch, a man in his 70s who had spent decades studying Ravenswood's occult history. Finch's home was cluttered with papers, books, and artifacts that looked eerily similar to what the Harrisons had collected. "They were never alone," Finch said when Olivia and Marcus confronted him. "The Harrisons were meticulous, but they corresponded with others. Scholars, collectors, occultists, they all sought to maintain the shadows. And yes, some of them remained hidden in town, quietly preserving the rituals, waiting for the opportunity to continue." Olivia's stomach tightened. "Are they still active?" Finch hesitated. "I cannot say for certain, but the patterns suggest that yes, some may still be trying. They are cautious, intelligent, and patient, and they may have recruited others, people who don't even know what they're involved in fully." That evening, Olivia, Marcus, and Clara visited one of the suspected houses, a large, ivy-covered mansion near the northern edge of town. According to Finch and cross-reference maps, the home had been in the same family for generations. The current occupants, seemingly ordinary, had unknowingly carried forward small elements of the ritual practices. Artifacts kept for family tradition, symbols drawn in hidden corners, faintly echoing the patterns in the book. Olivia shivered. "It's insidious," she murmured. "Even without intention, they've kept the shadows alive. They've been unknowingly feeding the remnants of the darkness." Marcus agreed. "And this is just one house. There are more. We have to identify every anchor, every potential host, before the network can regroup." Clara's eyes narrowed. "Then we find them. We expose them. And we make sure they can't hide anymore." The investigation grew increasingly complex. Each lead seemed to branch into multiple possibilities. People who appeared innocent on the surface, teachers, shopkeepers, local officials, had familial connections to the Harrisons or their collaborators. Even those who had no direct knowledge of the rituals had unwittingly preserved elements that could allow the shadows to re-emerge. Olivia realized the enormity of the task. "We're not just stopping one person," she said quietly. "We're dismantling an entire system. It's generations deep, and we have to find every fragment." Marcus rubbed his temples. "And time is running out. Every day the network survives, the shadows grow stronger, even in fragments. We can't afford mistakes." Meanwhile, Clara began experiencing memories she hadn't fully accessed before. Fragments of whispers, shadow movements, and ritual sites she had never consciously seen came to her in vivid, sometimes terrifying flashes. "I can see them," she said one night, drawing symbols in her notebook. "Not the shadows, the people who kept them. I know where some of them are. I remember." Olivia watched, simultaneously in awe and concern. "Clara, slow down. We have to verify these memories before we act." "But," If you're right, this could be the breakthrough we need. Clara nodded, her face pale but determined. We can't wait. They're still out there. They're watching, waiting. 1 week later, Olivia and Marcus began visiting every location Clara had recalled. Some were mundane houses, others abandoned properties. All contained evidence of lingering ritual activity. Artifacts had been hidden, carvings etched into walls, symbols on floors. Each site offered clues, fragments of the larger network. In one abandoned farmhouse, they found a journal belonging to a man named Edgar Mallory, a distant cousin of the Harrisons. His writings detailed attempts to reconstruct rituals, coordinate with outside members of the network, and preserve the Shadow's power. Mallory's obsession had driven him to near insanity. The final pages of the journal suggested he had left behind tools and instructions for successors. Olivia felt a chill. The network, it was never just local. It was designed to endure, to survive. Even if we destroy the anchors here, someone could rebuild from Mallory's notes. Marcus clenched his fists. Then we find the notes, the successors, and anyone still involved. We finish this properly now, before it starts again. Their search eventually led them to the outskirts of town, to a hidden property deep in the forest. The estate, long abandoned and overgrown, contained underground tunnels and chambers similar to the Harrison estate. It was here that Olivia and Marcus realized the true scale of the network. Multiple locations, carefully maintained, interconnected, and designed to keep the Shadows alive indefinitely. Clara, standing beside Olivia, whispered, "They're still alive, the people who did this. Some of them are right here in town. Watching. Waiting." Olivia nodded, heart heavy. "Then we find them. Every single one. And we make sure the Shadows can never return." As night fell, Olivia and Marcus prepared to confront the most dangerous remaining members of the network. Their knowledge was incomplete, but the fragments Clara had provided offered a starting point. They weren't just hunting shadows, they were hunting the hidden hands that had nurtured them for decades. The whispers of Ravenswood's dark past had grown louder with each discovery. But Olivia knew this. The final confrontation was near, and the fate of the town, and the memory of its victims, depended on what they would do next. Somewhere in the darkness, the network stirred, sensing pursuit. And for the first time in decades, someone was coming for them. The night air in Ravenswood was bitterly cold, sharp with the lingering scent of snow and smoke. Olivia Kane, Marcus Vance, and Clara approached the hidden estate on the northern edge of town, their breaths misting in the darkness. The last few weeks had been a relentless hunt, tracing the remnants of the Shadow network, piecing together generations of secrets, and confronting the lingering traces of terror that had haunted the town for decades. Tonight, Olivia knew, they would face the true architects of Ravenswood's darkness, the ones who had ensured the Shadows endured beyond the destruction of the Harrison estate, the hidden hands that had nurtured the evil, manipulated the vulnerable, and maintained control over generations of fear. "This is it," Marcus said quietly, surveying the massive, vine-choked mansion before them. "No more fragments. No more hiding. They're here, and we're ending this tonight." Clara, holding Olivia's hand tightly, glanced at the looming structure. "I can feel them," she whispered. "Watching. Waiting. They know we're here." Olivia squeezed her hand. "Then they'll see we're not afraid." The front door had long since rotted, and they slipped inside through a side entrance. The mansion was a maze of corridors, dust-covered staircases, and forgotten rooms. Shadows clung to the corners, remnants of the darkness that had once thrived here. Some moved unnaturally, as if testing their intruders, observing, calculating. Olivia opened the book, illuminated by the flashlight in her other hand. The rituals and incantations they had learned were their guide, their weapon, and their shield. But she knew this would be different from the Harrison estate. This was not just a location. It was a hub, a nexus of the network, a place where generations of adherents had fed, reinforced, and preserved the Shadows. "They're not just shadows," Olivia said, voice low. "They're human too. Some of them are still alive. Some of them still believe in it." Marcus nodded grimly. "And they'll fight. Hard. This isn't just about fear or darkness, it's about power. Control. They won't give it up." They descended into the basement, where Clara's memory had led them weeks before. The chamber was enormous, lined with shelves of jars, bundles of papers, and artifacts similar to those they had destroyed at the Harrison estate. Symbols were etched into every surface, pulsating faintly in the dim light, almost alive. A figure emerged from the shadows, a tall man, his face partially obscured, but with a presence that radiated authority. Behind him, 3 others stepped into view. All of them were adults who had spent decades maintaining the rituals, the network, and the shadow's power. "You shouldn't be here," the first man said, voice calm but icy. "You don't understand what you're dealing with." Olivia raised the book, her voice steady. "We understand enough. The shadows end tonight. Your network ends tonight. No more children, no more fear, no more hiding in the shadows." The man laughed softly, a sound devoid of warmth. "You think you can destroy generations of preparation with a few chants and rituals? You are children playing with fire." Clara stepped forward, her voice fierce despite her youth. "I survived your fire. I saw your shadows. I know your secrets. And I will stop you." The tension in the chamber was electric. The shadows, sensing the confrontation, writhed along the walls, converging toward the intruders with unnatural speed. The network's members moved to protect them, waving objects and artifacts that amplified the darkness. Olivia and Marcus began the incantation, following the book step by step. Clara helped, guiding them to symbols and objects that had been hidden from view. The room trembled as the shadows reacted, tendrils of darkness lashing out, trying to protect the network's core. "You can't stop us," one of the network members shouted, raising a ceremonial dagger etched with ancient runes. He lunged toward the circle, attempting to disrupt the ritual. Marcus reacted instantly, intercepting the man and throwing him off balance. Olivia continued chanting, her voice rising above the screams and whispers. The symbols on the floor glowed brighter, responding to the words of power. Clara, eyes wide, pointed toward a cluster of artifacts. "Move them! Move them into the circle!" she cried. Together, they shifted the objects, creating the necessary energy alignment to weaken the shadows. The shadows screamed, a sound not quite human, echoing through the chamber, shaking dust from the ceiling. The network members staggered, their control faltering. Olivia seized the moment, reciting the final verses of the incantation. A blinding light erupted from the circle, cutting through the shadows. Tendrils flailed, screeching and twisting, before dissolving into nothingness. The chamber shook violently, then fell eerily silent. When Olivia opened her eyes, the room was still. The shadows were gone. The network members, stunned and disoriented, collapsed to their knees. Some wept, some screamed, but all were powerless. The centuries of accumulated evil, meticulously preserved, had been shattered. Clara exhaled slowly. "It's over. They're gone." Olivia nodded, though her mind raced. "It's over here, yes. But the world beyond Ravenswood, knowledge of the rituals, the artifacts, the network, it could survive. We have to ensure it doesn't. Every journal, every artifact must be destroyed or secured." Marcus agreed. "We'll catalog what remains, seal it, and report to authorities. Nothing can be left for anyone to continue this." The following days were spent meticulously cleaning, cataloging, and securing every remnant of the network. Survivors were relocated safely, and families began rebuilding their lives. Ravenswood started to breathe again, the pervasive sense of fear lifting like a fog. Clara, despite her small frame, became a symbol of resilience. Her memory and bravery had helped locate the remaining anchors and identify network members. The town slowly began to heal, though scars, both physical and emotional, remained. One afternoon, as Olivia walked through the restored precinct, she received a call from Marcus. His voice was hesitant. "Olivia, I've been reviewing the journals and maps again. There's something odd. A series of references we didn't fully understand. Locations outside Ravenswood, some artifacts mentioned. I can't explain it entirely, but it suggests there may have been coordination with people far beyond this town." Olivia's stomach tightened. "You mean, the network might extend further?" "Yes," Marcus said slowly. "We've dismantled the core here, destroyed the shadows, and stopped the local network. But there could be others. Somewhere waiting. Watching. Learning." Olivia exhaled slowly, determination hardening in her chest. "Then we stay vigilant. Ravenswood is safe, for now. But we can't let our guard down. Evil like this, it never truly disappears." We make sure history doesn't repeat itself. That night, Olivia, Marcus, and Clara stood on the hill overlooking the town. Lights twinkled faintly in the snow, children laughed in yards, and families moved cautiously but surely toward a life reclaimed from shadows. Clara leaned against Olivia. "Do you think they'll come back?" she asked softly. Olivia thought of the shadows, the network, and the hidden hands they had confronted. "If we do our part, Clara, they won't. Not here. Not while we remember, while we protect, while we stay vigilant. Shadows can be weakened, but courage, hope, and truth, they endure." Marcus placed a hand on Olivia's shoulder. "We've faced the worst of Ravenswood. The town owes its future to us, and to everyone who survived. But the fight to protect that future, it never truly ends." As they watched, a faint flicker of shadow stirred in the distance, almost imperceptible against the winter snow, a whisper of what once was. But this time Olivia felt no fear. They had faced the heart of darkness, destroyed its core, and revealed its hidden hands. Ravenswood would endure, and somewhere deep within the world, the echoes of the shadows had begun to fade. Not entirely gone, but diminished, contained, powerless against those who would remember, who would fight, and who would protect. The sun rose over Ravenswood, its pale light glinting on snow and rooftops. A town scarred but alive, haunted but healing, had finally reclaimed the light. Olivia Kane, Marcus Vance, and Clara turned away from the hill and toward the future. A future built not on fear, but on vigilance, courage, and the hope that darkness, no matter how patient, could never conquer those who refused to forget.